Chapter 61 Beatdown. Third form Frieza's elongated head was smashed onto the ground. The sheer force cracked his head and deformed his face. Ha! But the attacker didn't let go. Frieza's body kept ragdolling across the environment. Boom, boom, boom. Sadly for the attacker, it seems the angry Frieza finally found a chance to fight back. His thick tail smashed onto the white armored man. Gah! Raditz's chest sunk. His armor deformed as he was catapulted across the environment, breaking multiple trees and finally smashing into a lake. Splash! Quickly holding his breath, Raditz attempted to swim back out. His yellow eyes glowed with power. Umph! But as soon as he was about to surface, his head was gripped tightly from above. It was Frieza's three-fingered feet keeping him underwater. His head was pushed further back in the more he struggled. Even his skull was also under a lot of pressure. Frieza was squeezing it with all his strength, as if wanting for it to split open like a watermelon. Raditz's eyes' yellow glow was intense, but it didn't do anything. His strength simply couldn't keep up. Damn it! This was looking like a dead end. The constant thrashing was taking away his energy and his lungs were on fire. The only reason he could persist for so long under such pain was due to Pai giving him advice on how to conserve energy underwater. But all things had an end, even his lung capacity. Crack. Dash. Blurb. Water started pouring down Raditz's throat, which was burning his lungs. His struggle got weaker and weaker. He kept gripping at Frieza's feet with no hope. Even the yellow glow started flashing in his eyes. His Akari was failing with him, unable to keep his concentration. Just before Raditz's light was completely extinguished, his body flared up with a red aura. Boom! The resulting ki burst blew apart the lake in its entirety, which gave Raditz a chance to breathe again. He used that one gasp of breath to hold onto Frieza's legs, and flipped himself up, hitting Frieza's face straight with his muscular leg. Boom! Which caused Frieza to loosen his grip as he went hurtling through the green fields. Raditz, ignoring all that, quickly straightened himself. He was breathing heavily, his entire body was wet from the water and his mane was dripping with sweat. Enough. The red aura enveloping Raditz was snuffed out, which caused a chain reaction and the entire environment started flickering in and out of existence. Within a few more seconds the surroundings vanished completely. Raditz's armor no longer had any water stains, there was no lake, neither were there any trees. The whole environment was gone. The only thing that remained was the pain Raditz felt and the half-broken android T. Boom. Raditz was trying to get his breath back when the door to the gravity room opened and a lot of people poured in with various emotions on their faces. Nappa was the first to go and get Raditz up. Everyone had seen the entire fight. It was meant more as a taste of what's to come. The idea was hatched by Bulma while she worked on the holograms, and Raditz agreed to get it done, but after watching this fight it was less a taste, and more a punch to the face. King. How is Frieza so strong? Even the legendary Super Saiyan can't beat him. After coughing a bit more, Raditz got his bearings back and wondered how he should respond to the shaken Nappa. This setup was more than just a simulation. The attacks he experienced were the real deal. He alone was under immense gravity, but Android T, who acted as Frieza, was free from any gravity. This made simulating a real opponent easy for Bulma. She did something like that in canon too, but it was only plain drones which attacked Vegeta. Here the existence of Android T took her down a different path. Now instead of flying robots it was an android cloaked with a hologram which attacked the user. Frieza. If you want my honest answer, I believe his full power is above 100 million. This is just something I felt whenever I had been around Frieza. Although I am pretty sure this is accurate, even these forms are something I had once seen by chance when I snuck into King Cold's palace. That was Raditz's answer to how he knew about the forms Frieza had in the first place, and this had actually happened. The original Raditz had once wandered into a corridor he shouldn't have been to, and there were portraits of different forms of Frieza's race. Those might have been one man's transformation, or it might have been different people of the Frieza race, like King Cold himself. Almost nobody knew about Frieza transformations, so original Raditz didn't connect these with transformations, but this was now an excellent cover form Raditz. Frieza is above 100 million. Nappa finally managed to push these words out of his throat. Everyone was almost aghast after watching this fight and didn't know how to handle the fact that this wasn't even his final form. Their idea to watch what they were up against didn't seem like such a good idea anymore, now that they know how less of a chance they had. Only a few more days remained for them to reach Namek. The Z fighters needed to think quickly if they wanted to survive against Frieza. Chapter 62 Planet Namek. After the Z fighters experienced how tragic Frieza truly was, they redoubled their efforts to get stronger. Gravity rooms were crammed to the limit, image training was done in plenty, even Goku broke a 100,000 instead of his canon 90,000. This long hard training continued until today. This was the day the spaceship was about to hit Namek, and no one was training anymore. Queen, how much longer till we reach? Asked Nappa. He was feeling pretty confident about himself right now. After experiencing Frieza vs Raditz he threw himself against the hologram-coded android T. Nappa nearly broke himself with how hard he pushed his body. After experiencing Frieza's strength his Saiyan instincts were flaring up. He was once again starting to improve after so many years. We'll be there in 10 minutes. Replied Bulma from the cockpit. She was making sure the spaceship was parked in a safe position, somewhere in the sky. The Z fighters were both relieved and stressed after hearing that. No matter how everyone pushed themselves, it was the Saiyans who improved the most. The humans were around 15,000, some were a little below that, some were a little above, but no one reached the growth the Saiyans experienced. Man, we didn't improve nearly as much as you guys did, even Piccolo improved a lot faster than us. Throwing his head back, Yamcha complained. His complaint received a solid grunt from Piccolo, who was now reaching almost 80k. Tien decided to ignore it. He was somewhat of an alien too, but he was in reality just below Krillin. He was more human than he was alien, it seems. The core of the group, the Suns, sat around with different emotions as well. Nappa was proud of himself, Gohan was nervous, Raditz was calm, and Goku was excited. Honestly, I think you as a species are close to hitting your limit. I can feel it, even I am close. Gripping his fist, Raditz explained his observations. I achieved 1.5 million a few days ago and I can feel my strength can't grow much after this. I am reaching a species limit too. I am not quite sure where it is at. 3 million? 6 million? 10 million? Somewhere around that is where I will stop improving as a regular Sun. After all his training in Otherworld, Gravity Room and Time Chambers, base Goku was still absolutely no match for a Namek Arc Frieza, according to Beerus. Even in Super, after Goku obtained God Ki, his base still fluctuated immensely. This was theorized to be because he sometimes used God Ki in base and sometimes didn't. Although not outright stated, the manga made it a lot clearer. Goku indeed did have a regular base. Many of his fights and transformation choices made sense only when that was considered to be the case. I wasn't sure of this before, but now I am. This is where my limit lies. It just goes to show how absurd Broly really was. Broly might not be forever growing like the old Broly, but his power itself was over the top. For him to fight the way he did, he had to have at least 100 million in base. That was 10 times more than what Raditz can feel his limit was at. This alone made him helpless. Broly was the legendary Super Saiyan for a reason. It wasn't his transformations or his rage, it was his sheer natural strength, the top of what Saiyan biology can reach without changing into a different species altogether. I can feel it too. My growth has begun to slow down. I am not quite there yet, but I am close, said Tien after a while of uncomfortable silence. They were all feeling pretty down considering they were getting left behind. It wasn't for a lack of trying, and there wasn't a thing they could do about this. This was what was the source of their sadness. But sadness wasn't a thing where Goku was present. Oh come on, you guys are plenty strong. So what if you're growing slowly, Krillin? You still haven't reached your limit, right? And when you are there, we will figure something out. King Kai is the god of our galaxy. He told me there are plenty of strong Earth fighters in Otherworld. You'll catch up in no time. Rubbing his nose, Krillin asked with an embarrassed smile. You really think so, Goku? Of course. Just when Goku was given Krillin a big smile. Asterisk. Asterisk. The Z fighters all became instantly serious. They could sense something evil and strong, very strong. Is that Frieza? Oh boy. Whatever confidence Krillin had gathered was immediately scattered in the wind. This was such an evil key signature. It was making Vegetos look tame in comparison. We are reaching atmosphere. Everyone hold on. Bulma loudly yelled and the spaceship began to shake lightly. It was safe, but a comfortable landing had to be made. Taking a deep breath, Raditz rose from the sofa. His eyes scanned the Z fighters, and what they gathered from his eyes were confidence. This gave everyone else confidence as well. Raditz was their strongest fighter, and if he was confirmed in taking Frieza on, they can always help too. With that thought, every Z fighter got up from their seats. Raditz gave them a last look. If Guru unlocks their potential, these guys will receive the final boost they will ever receive. It's all downhill from here, unless they learn to use that. Whoom. The spaceship jerked once and then stopped after a lot of shaking, which made Raditz immediately ask Bulma. This isn't normal. What happened? Bulma yelled back from the cockpit, with irritation all over her voice. Some jerk attacked the ship? Raditz? He's here. Immediately blasting open the door, Raditz rushed out, and so did the Z fighters, and they came face to face with a red-headed human-looking man. Rikum. Spat Raditz, one of the Ginyu Force was here. Chapter 63 Dragon Ball's Kakarot, do you feel that? Asked Raditz with his voice down. He was currently in a starting contest with Rikum, who was posing and giving them taunting looks at the same time. Using this time, Raditz wanted to get a plan set up. They were obviously exposed. It must have been Vegetos doing, or Ginyu Force should not have been here, much less specifically looking for them. Yes, there are people coming here, lots of strong people. Acknowledged Goku with a serious face. He could feel one of them was stronger than him by quite a lot. The others not so much, but if they go together he might have some trouble. Ginyu Force? Rikum. With the last shout, Rikum finished his introduction, and Raditz knew he was about to start attacking, but Bulma hadn't gone far enough, and neither did they plan what to do yet. He needed to distract Rikum for a while. Rikum, you clown, what are you doing here? Asked Nappa after he saw Raditz's covered eyes, and Rikum smiled widely at Nappa's insult, but before he could say something in return, boom! Nappa rushed to Rikum and punched him straight in his face, actually knocking out some of his front teeth. Raditz used this time to wave at Bulma and give her a direction where the large power levels weren't coming from. She's gone. Our ride home is safe, let's go. The Z fighters landed on the ground after Bulma took the spaceship away. They no longer had to surround the ship for protection any longer. So Raditz's words were met with unanimous approval, and now that they were back on the ground, the Z fighters got ready, because the enemies were here. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Four figures rushed towards their position, and almost immediately Nappa received a solid kick to his stomach from a blue blur. Ugh. Skidding to a stop, Nappa rubbed his stomach with a pissed off face, but he wasn't hurt too much even if he didn't see it coming. Glaring at the blue blur who was named Berter, Nappa growled. He ignored the rest of the Jinyu force who had regrouped, and Rikum seems to have recovered enough to join in too. His teethless grin on full display, the man carried himself as if he didn't feel pain whatsoever. And Nappa was going to make sure he breaks the rest of his teeth too, to see how long he can keep that attitude going. Nappa, come back. But his plans to rush Rikum fell through after a voice called him back. Nappa was ordered by Raditz. He could feel Nappa wanted to take them all on his own, while Nappa could definitely do that normally after his recent boost. But the problem was that Jinyu was here. That man was not only 30k stronger than Nappa, he was also a body snatcher. Yes, my king. Compiled Nappa and jumped back to the group, standing on the right of Raditz, whereas Gaku stood on his left. Jinyu let that all happen happily. He must have a living audience to do their introduction. So you must be the new Sun King? A cruel one, aren't you? Vegeta was quite the sorry sight when he returned back to base. Said Jinyu with a big smile. He was happy that Rikum found the Sun King. They were tasked to take the man down. Vegeta's arrival and subsequent actions caused quite the stir in the Frieza force, so much so that Frieza decided to get involved. A legend was said to be the cause, but Jinyu wasn't sure. Folding his hands with a balanced disregard for Jinyu, Raditz raised his head and stared at him like he was a worm. What? Jinyu immediately felt a shiver run across his body. This was the characteristics of his race. This meant that a body better than his current one was in sight, so Jinyu instantly got cautious. But if he was good at something, it was hiding his intentions. His species innately had those instincts to help them sneak attack stronger foes. Not much for words, are you? Sad. I am told I make great company. If only you gave me a chance. That's right, Captain is a great company, repeated Juice with a smirk. He didn't know his captain had already felt some threat from the king. Juice was simply trying to intimidate Raditz. But this wasn't their usual business. Jinyu had set sights on Raditz's body. Still, Jinyu wasn't about to tell them anything. If they die, they die. He would get the king's body out of this one way or the other. Body snatchers, what a bizarre species. Raditz narrowed his eyes while thinking in his mind. What neither of them knew was Raditz didn't need someone to speak out loud. Raditz knew Jinyu's intentions as soon as he had them. There wasn't a single chance of Jinyu sneak attacking him and actually winning, or winning against anyone for that matter now that he was here. Neither Vegeta nor the frog were here to give Gaku his body back. Raditz didn't want a budget version of Gaku Black running around so soon. Jinyu had to be stopped before he could do any damage. Be careful, especially you Kakarot. This is the leader of the Jinyu force. He can swap bodies with anyone. Do not let him get you. What? How did you know? Jinyu was startled beyond measure. This was one of the greatest kept secret of the Jinyu force. Only Frieza and a few others knew of this. Who leaked it to the Sun King? Oh wow. I see, my king. Seriously. Oh man. Gaku and the rest of the Z fighters were now wary. After watching Jinyu's reaction, they knew this man had the plan to steal one of their bodies. And Yamcha was sure it was his body Jinyu wanted to steal. He should totally stay away from this guy. So you won't tell who told you about this, is that right? Fine, I'll beat it out of you myself. Sun. Jinyu angrily barked. He was beyond pissed at his secret going out like that, but Raditz was not concentrating on Jinyu. He had his eyes closed for a second and opened them with shock. Whoa. The skies of Namek were beginning to darken. Black clouds were gathering on a position not far away from here. And then a flash of bright yellow light rose from the ground, which caused the Z fighters' heart to almost stop. That's the Eternal Dragon. Without another word, Raditz rushed towards the position with his eyes glowing yellow. If Frieza got his wish, it was game over for him. Chapter 64 Double Trouble. Grand Elder Guru was the father of every Namekian present on Namek, and he was extremely saddened by the massacre of his kind that was taking place. Namekians had managed to recover from a catastrophe that would have eliminated their race just a few years ago, and now another massacre was upon them. But that wasn't all. The enemy had come for the Dragon Balls he made. That was why they were getting massacred, and this was a reality which saddened Guru greatly. Ah! Screams of his children echoed in Guru's ears, but he was so old he could barely talk, much less move. He knew the enemy was coming closer. Not many still remained, only a handful of people, and few kids survived. We will never give you the Dragon Balls? You monster! Dash! Swish! Another child fell. Guru had seen much, but his race's complete extinction was not something he could ever be prepared for, even after all his experience. Nail, his personal guard, was out there trying to fight against the enemy, and he was last heard from half an hour ago. Guru feared the worst. Boom! Out of nowhere, the front wall of Guru's house was blown apart. The debris hit Guru's old body and they hurt him greatly. Oh my sincerest apologies. A thin and distinctly evil voice exclaimed in a polite tone. His words might have been speaking of apology, but the dead Namekians lying behind him spoke of something else entirely. Guru opened his eyes with great effort and saw the face of their killer. The aggressor's short stature didn't make him any less threatening to Guru. What do you come here for, outsider? Guru asked in a deep voice. His old age was apparent even in his speech, but this didn't faze Frieza. His polite smile and gentlemanly demeanor expressed his manners, but in stark contrast were his actions. Allow me to introduce myself, Namekian. I am Lord Frieza and I have come for the Dragon Balls. I was told the last one would be with you. May I have it? I am quite interested in making a wish. Guru's fears were coming true. The man really did come for the Dragon Balls. He might speak politely, but one look at him would convince anyone otherwise. Frieza's henchmen had half-dead Namekians and the remaining children, many of whom had already died and only some were still alive. Frieza himself was holding behind him a half-dead man with spiky hair. Frieza's tail was tightly curled around the man's throat. The man in question was somehow still holding on to his consciousness, refusing to go down even when his body almost did. Another victim of Frieza is what Guru would have considered him, if his energy also wasn't so evil. You cannot have the Dragon Balls, said Guru. He knew telling this now was a death sentence to his entire race, but he cannot in good faith give this evil being access to the Dragon Balls. This was his duty as the creator of Dragon Balls, even if he was bleeding from pushing his race to extinction by his own hands. After Guru's direct refusal, Frieza raised a finger and said in a polite yet authoritative voice, "That wouldn't do. I came all the way here for the Dragon Balls. I cannot possibly leave empty-handed. How about this Namekian? For every minute I don't have my Dragon Balls, one of you will die. You can start counting now." Pointing his raised finger at a scared child, Frieza smirked. Siainu. Ga. A pink energy beam went straight through the heart of the child, killing him as he slowly lost his breath in pain. "You monster. You will never get the Dragon Balls. We would rather die." Siathu. A death beam through the arms of Grand Elder Guru immediately shut every Namekian up. "You." Guru's pained voice stabbed them straight in their hearts. They were ready to die, but seeing Guru get hurt was very painful for them. "I do not believe you understand your position, Namekians. Hand over the Dragon Balls." Frieza's voice chilled at the end, and Guru knew this was the last chance the monster was giving them. He was in pain, but he wasn't afraid, his only regret being he couldn't save even one of his race, because after this debacle Frieza would eliminate them all. Siainu. 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 Ugh. Guru was continuously getting death beamed by Frieza, who took his time torturing him to the limit. Every hole created in him burned but didn't kill him immediately. Frieza was simply torturing him for the sake of torturing. To his men it wasn't anything new considering how gleeful they looked. But to the peace-loving Namekians it was too much, way too much. "Enough. Stop." Stopping for a second, Frieza turned towards another older Namekian, and then his fingers shone again. Siainu. The elder's hands clenched and he almost pleaded. "Please stop. Don't hurt him anymore." Putting his finger down now that he was spoken to in a polite way, Frieza turned towards the elder. "Oh, are you ready to give me the Dragon Balls?" "I am, but you must not kill any more of our people." Bringing his hand to his face, Frieza laughed joyfully. "Oh ho ho ho, bring me the Dragon Balls please." That was the only thing he said, no promises at all, but Elder Muri had only that one hope remaining. Every Namekian alive had an angry and tragic look to them, but nobody stopped Muri, because this was not something Muri wanted to do either. The one who was suffering the most was Muri. Even the Grand Elder Guru only sighed. He knew Muri was soft-hearted. He couldn't see him getting killed in such a fashion. He would have told Muri to let him go, but he didn't have the energy to speak. His entire body was riddled with holes. What he now wanted was for Frieza to finish him off, making sure the Dragon Balls deactivate. Clink. Muri picked up the last Dragon Ball hiding behind Guru's seat, and brought it to Frieza. Dropping it together with the 6 collected balls made them shine all at once. Blink. 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 The Dragon Balls flickered. Their shine was on full display as their magic was beginning to show. Frieza was close to getting his wish, but Guru couldn't make out half of the words being spoken. He had lost too much blood and was dying. He could still vaguely feel the dragon being summoned. "If only I had passed away sooner," thought Guru. His life was passing, but it was too late. They lost. His senses had almost shut down. His ears only heard some last muffled voices, yet out of nowhere. Dodon Ray. A clear voice and a searing pain in his chest. His heart was blown away. Yet he had only his thanks to give. He could feel the wish hasn't been granted yet, and with him gone no Namekian will be forced to bend. "Thank you, stranger." With a smile Guru took his final breath. "What's happening? Where did that come from?" exclaimed Zarbon, his eyes looking everywhere and his scouter trying its best to pick something up. But soon his shock was for a different reason, because before their very eyes the eternal dragon began to flash. Gruel. With a deep grief-filled howl, Porunga flashed out of existence. The Dragon Balls turned to stone soon after. Boom. Instantly the ground below Frieza's feet collapsed into a crater. It was from the sheer energy he was releasing out of anger. "What is the meaning of this?" Frieza asked with a completely pissed-off face. His teeth clenched and his tail tightened around Vegeta's neck, making him struggle and choke without support. Whoever took his wish away just now would pay for it dearly. Frieza would eliminate them with his own hands. And Frieza could already make someone out in the sky, someone who was coming down. Whoosh. Frieza didn't have to wait too long as he came face to face with someone who make his angry mood become straight-up murderous. "It's you, the Nusian King." As if a switch was flipped, Frieza's anger vanished, but the veins on top of his head told a different story. He was boiling from the inside. "You were hiding in plain sight around me all this while. I'll admit I never would have guessed the most pathetic of the monkeys was the legendary Super Saiyan? That is what Vegeta seems to believe you are." Bringing the coughing Vegeta before him, Frieza punched him from the back. "Aik," making Vegeta call out in pain, but he did manage to open his eyes. And the first sight he saw was Raditz. He felt pathetic showing himself like this. He felt like an utter disgrace to end up like trash in the hands of Frieza. He couldn't do anything now, no matter how much he tried. He didn't stand a chance against Frieza. He never stood one to begin with. "Raditz, please, kill Frieza." As the Saiyan King, please, avenge our race. Clench. Aiaiaiaiaiaiaic. Vegeta's eyes almost popped from his neck getting squeezed. Those tears were involuntarily or from his failure was a mystery. But Raditz didn't need to solve this mystery. He had been with Vegeta long enough to know the prince just put down his pride to beg him, the new king, to end this. Frieza. Raditz spoke with narrowed eyes. Ending this wasn't something only Vegeta wanted to do. Raditz also had to make sure Frieza stayed dead. If Frieza survived by any chance and actually trained before coming to find him in the Android saga, he will be a goner. It's too soon to fight Golden Frieza, and God forbid Black Frieza, so, Kikoho. A surprise Kikoho took the entire army by surprise. Raditz used his full 1.5 million base to fire off a swift Kikoho right at Frieza. What? No. And almost immediately Frieza was drowned in it, getting caught off guard by the suddenness of the attack. His screams resounded for a split second and then faded from existence, leaving the entire Frieza force and Namekians stunned. But Raditz himself wasn't happy. He was stiff and sweat was beginning to pour down his back. My, son, you almost got yourself killed. A cold voice came from behind the dust cloud, and soon a tall and short figure came before everyone's eyes. Shit. Vegeta, you bastard? What did you tell them? Chapter 65 Raditz vs Frieza. Raditz's surprise attack didn't work and now he was alone with no help in sight, facing off against both Frieza and King Cold at once. Fantastic. Looking at the father-son duo, Raditz folded his hands and kept his cool. I didn't take you for a coward, Frieza. You called your daddy dearest to fight against a little old me. Does the legend scare you that much? How pathetic. Words filled with disgust came out of Raditz's mouth. Although he was not happy with this situation, he still had to keep his mind in the game. One slip up and he is done for. You vile monkey dash. Stopping his words mid-sentence, Frieza laughed with veins wiggling on his forehead. Your kind is just as crude as always, but then again what else can I expect from you Syans? King Cold laughed along in a low voice, agreeing to his son wholeheartedly. The legend that my son has been going on about, I came here to see for myself. Are you supposed to be the legend? Is this what you were afraid of, Frieza? Veins popping with anger, Frieza maintained his smirk. Perhaps Vegeta was out of his mind, father. Look, Vegeta, is your legendary Super Saiyan? This is who you believed would avenge your race? How pathetic. Boom. Forcefully throwing Vegeta to a mountain with a flick of his tail, Frieza clenched his fists and bent down. A pinkish-purple energy was starting to leak from his body. Raditz had almost killed him with his last attack. Frieza was pissed and wanted nothing more than to destroy Raditz with his own hands. You think you can take me on with such little strength? Well, guess what, monkey? What you see before you is only my first form. A massive amount of energy leaked from Frieza. It began rampaging throughout the area, taking the surviving Namekians and Vegeta with it. Raditz cursed watching the helpless Namekians getting caught and moved swiftly to save the peaceful bunch. Frieza himself was now protected by King Cold, and Cold was a threat Raditz couldn't ignore. He simply didn't know if Cold could transform immediately like Frieza in ROF. Cold was keeping an eye on Raditz all this time since his last sneak attack, so instead of brashly attacking Frieza again, Raditz saved the remaining Namekians first. He wasn't really worried as he still had his Iacre, which was up to 10 times after his recent training. 15 million power level is enough to handle them until one of them is out of the picture. Whoosh. Finally bringing the last Namekian out of the blast's radius, Raditz gestured at them to leave. Frieza had already killed all his men with this forceful transformation alone. Even Zarbon was dead. At least they don't have to worry about the soldiers attacking them again. But the Namekians didn't leave immediately. Elder Muri came to Raditz and bowed. Thank you, Saiyan King, said Elder Muri, who was now the de facto leader after Guru passed away. Raditz once again waved at them. Frieza was almost done and Cold was looking at them with curious eyes, which meant danger, a lot of danger. Leave at once, and take my companion with you if you can. Pointing towards the panting Vegeta, Raditz told the Namekians, who nodded with a bit of struggle and quickly picked up Vegeta and started running away. King Cold still looked at them funny and then at Raditz. What is the point of this? After we are done with you we will finish them all either way. If they had stayed, you worms could have tried fighting together? Perhaps that would let you understand your place. King Cold said with a smile, his words just as vicious as his intent, and his sentence finishing together with Frieza's transformation. Now two second form father-son were standing side by side. Raditz let out a breath. The father-son had a strange dynamic. They clearly didn't trust each other, yet they acted as if they did. As long as one falls, the other would transform instantly. Raditz's best bet was waiting until some help arrives. That was one of the reasons he let Vegeta go with the Namekians. Here's hoping the healed Vegeta insists on coming back, or they get Goku, Piccolo, or Nappa to support. Raditz was not arrogant enough to think he can take on 100% Frieza alone, much less take on both Cold and Frieza. His idea had been to get his potential boosted by Guru after arriving at Namek, but that went absolutely nowhere. Thud. Sadly, giving Raditz time to think wasn't Frieza's game plan. Slapping his massive tail on the ground, Frieza stared at Raditz. Are you done gawking at me, monkey? Raditz knew he couldn't delay it any longer. They were ready to act, and thankfully so was he. Lowering himself into a stance, Raditz's hair began floating up. His eyes started to glow yellow and his strength was dramatically increasing. Although King Cold and Frieza were wholly unaware as they didn't know how to sense ki, but that didn't mean they couldn't see him change. What's this? Is this the legendary Super Saiyan? You are looking different from the rest of the monkeys, said Frieza with no fear whatsoever. He didn't know Raditz had long shot up beyond his second form to somewhere beyond his third. Right now King Cold and Frieza were both in their second forms, although King Cold was stronger than Frieza in his second form, but he was still nowhere close to the 15 million Raditz was at. Is this the legendary Super Saiyan? Smirking ferociously, Raditz vanished and appeared before Frieza's shocked eyes. Why don't you try it for yourself, Frieza? Boom. Frieza's cheek sunk and his body ragdolled across the grassland. You. King Cold was aghast before he too was grabbed by the horns and received a knee straight to his nose. Crack. Cracking it instantly, before he could recover from his brain being shaken, Raditz took his knee back and crack, rammed into Cold's face again, his grip tightly on Cold's horns letting him flail around with no escape. Boom. Crack. Boom. Crack. King Cold was now in tremendous pain and doing whatever he could to push Raditz away, who was holding on with his full strength. But as King Cold's actions became more and more violent, something finally happened. Snap. Aiic. Cold's eyes became bloodshot, from his disgraceful treatment or from his horns, which were now broken and held in Raditz's hands. He didn't know. But instead of rushing back to Raditz like Frieza would have, Cold backed away immediately. He's backing away? He is different from Frieza, alright. He is the one who would rather use tricks to defeat Trunks. Cold was a man who was more shrewd than he was a fighter. Cold would say anything to get your guard down and then backstab you right after. Wait, Saiyan King dash. Nope. Boom. Another punch hit Cold's gut. His mouth opened wide from the sheer pain he was feeling, but Frieza's race's resistance to damage was second to none. Except for Bu maybe, but besides that Frieza's durability was the highest in Dragon Ball so far. Getting cut in half form waist down? He's fine. Blowing up with Namek without defending himself? He's fine. Getting absolutely destroyed by SSI Akri Broly? He's fine. No way was Raditz going to be convinced Cold had taken any real damage before he actually kicks the bucket. Boom. And so began Raditz's beatdown of Cold and Frieza whenever he returned for some more. Curiously, this situation was eerily similar to Broly railing on Frieza, with Frieza being in the receiving end of Iakri, but Raditz knew this wouldn't continue for long. It was only a matter of time before one of them manages break the game, either by transforming or straight away going for the Z fighters. He fully expected King Cold to do this, but this would work out in his favor. All the Z fighters are together against the Ginyu Force. Cold will only dig his own grave. Knowing that Raditz simply ignored the glint in Cold's eyes and focused on Frieza more, Cold needed to leave before he could give it his all against Frieza. Chapter 66 Kamehameha Boom. 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 Raditz kept dodging the rain of death beams fired by Frieza. It was supposed to be limiting his vision and judgment, but he sensed Cold running straight for the Ginyu Force. Finally, now Goku can handle Cold. That man can definitely transform further. There is a lot of energy dormant in him that he can't use. Raditz had sensed both Frieza and Cold's true power hidden within their bodies when he purposely looked for it. Cold was comparable to Frieza, that much Raditz knew, but what was new information was that Cold was not used to his transformations. Cold looked to be trying to transform many times but fumbled it all the time. In that case, Frieza was a total genius. This man could go in and out of forms whenever he wants. HAAA. Releasing a yellow energy wave of his own, Raditz overpowered all the dead beams fired by Frieza. Boom. Frieza once again ragdolled and crashed into a mountain. From where Raditz could sense his energy, it was beginning rise uncontrollably. He's transforming again. It's the third form, judging from energy reactions. After distancing himself from Raditz, Frieza transformed immediately. He was pissed after being beaten left and right by a Saiyan. The only reason he didn't do forceful transformations was not that he couldn't, but that it burns a lot more energy doing it like that. That was simply how his transformations worked, but now Frieza didn't care that much about conserving his energy. Raditz. Third form. Frieza's elongated head was giving Raditz déjà vu. This was how far he had ever reached fighting against Frieza in the simulations. This was the last phase of the boss fight he could get past. The final form Frieza was the part he was stuck in, couldn't make any progress. Might as well be soft-locked, thought Raditz. He missed his video games. Frieza, you managed to get uglier and uglier with each transformation. It's kinda amazing how bad you can look. Raditz's words ticked off Frieza again, but he was getting used to the insults the Saiyan King threw at him. He was scarily adaptable. It won't be much of a stretch to call Frieza the Broly of his race. Ugly? Ho ho ho, you savages can't even control yourselves before a mere moon. I blow up moons for breakfast, monkey. Raditz smiled. Frieza wasn't about to get pissed off easily anymore. He was adapting, but so was Raditz. Raditz's Saiyan body was currently in full throttle. His fighting instincts were focused like never before. With narrowed eyes, Raditz looked at Frieza curiously and asked a question. Why did you destroy our planet, Frieza? I don't think you will be scared of a mere legend. You don't act that way, Frieza. I had assumed it was King Cold's idea all this while, but after fighting against him today, I am sure it wasn't his. For 1 second Frieza's body started sweating ever so slightly, but that was enough for Raditz to catch on. Oh, you are sweating? I am on point then. There is something which scares you, Frieza. Didn't know I would see the day. Lord Frieza following orders because he is scared. Boom. Dodging the death beam fired his way, Raditz looked at Frieza with cold yellow eyes. You think you know everything, monkey? You don't have any idea what you are talking about. Frieza rushed over with his large body. He was hiding his anger at being reminded he was indeed taking orders from someone that time. Although he was the ruler, but that was Beerus. Beerus and Bu were someone Cold had told Frieza to keep clear from at all costs. Whoosh! Rolling away from the charge, Raditz turned around and grabbed Frieza's tail. Boom! And threw him at a mountain. Rushing towards the sky, Raditz joined his hands together. From now on he would fight to kill. Frieza needed to die and not reach his final form at any cost. For that he was going to use a technique he hadn't used once since the day he learned it. Kaa. Crash. Breaking open the rocks he was buried in, Frieza started charging at Raditz again, who calmly kept concentrating as much energy as he could. Backflipping away in mid-air, Raditz kicked Frieza's back with all his strength, sending him crashing onto the floor. A fall which Frieza stopped by flipping and landing on his feet instead. Hey. The energy ball was shining brightly in Raditz's hands, its potency increasing by the second. Creating a pink energy ball of his own, Frieza fired it as a large wave towards Raditz, who had built up all the energy he could in the basic Kamehameha. This technique of Rashi always hits harder than the power level that made it. It was quite similar to Piccolo's special beam cannon, but Kamehameha depended much more on control and the time spent to make it. And Raditz had both in spades. Both time and control were behind this one Kamehameha. It was the deadliest Kamehameha created till date. And Frieza was going to bear the brunt of it all. Perish? Frieza. Hey. Asterisk whoosh. Frieza's energy wave was attempting to fight back but was steadily defeated, causing him to look up in shock. No, it can't be. Frieza's pushed back with all his strength, his knees bending with the amount of effort he was dishing out. But it was no use, his veins were about to burst from pressure and he had fallen on the ground from the pushback. And finally, before his eyes the Kamehameha had managed to reach him, scalding him from the sheer heat. You damn monkey! Frieza roared. Even in his third form he was holding on to the attack for a few seconds before the Kamehameha detonated. Whoom! A hemisphere of yellow energy covered Namek. An attack of this potency would have destroyed Namek if not for Raditz detonating his attack on the surface. Huff huff huff. Raditz was panting. This took a lot out of him too. He was fighting against Cold and Frieza for a while, and maintaining a carry for this long wasn't easy either. Hopefully this attack did it. Raditz couldn't sense anything due to the Kamehameha's energy messing with his senses. But this should have been enough to at least hurt Frieza badly if not kill him outright. Raditz hoped it was. He was pretty dim-winded right now. Chapter 67 Sun Instincts. Raditz landed unsteadily and deactivated his Akari right after to catch his breath. The kickback from fighting in Akari for so long was intense, Raditz could hardly move his body anymore. Going beyond 8 times boost was a bad idea after all, Raditz thought with a grimace. After his training, although he could go beyond an 8 times Akari, it was still very taxing to him, so he had kept 10 times as his max possible limit. Yet he had to forcibly go 10 times to match the father-son duo. This forceful usage put a tremendous pressure on his body. Raditz was simply out of the game right now and needed healing. Don't give up on me now, body. Come on, move. But although he couldn't move anymore, he was silently struggling. His eyes never left the area Frieza just collapsed in. The excess energy was starting to die down and he could sense again. And what he sensed was pure bad news. Damn it, is that? Raditz cursed from what he was sensing. Not only was Frieza alive and well, he had gone ahead and done it. Step, step, step. Distinct stepping sounds came from the dust-covered area, sounds that were definitely made by non-human feet. Raditz could make out a short purple-headed Frieza coming out of the blast area with no injuries in sight. This was Frieza's final form, the best-looking Frieza there was, but Raditz wasn't able to appreciate the simplistic beauty of this design. For he was in all kinds of trouble right now. TCH, the transformation took care of his injuries. There was one weird power Frieza's race had, regeneration, more specifically transformative regeneration. In the original story it was used when Krillin severed Frieza's tail from his body, but as soon as Frieza went up a form he got it back. His race could even survive being separate from the waist down and still continue to fight. Seeing how Frieza was currently in full health, Raditz concluded that Frieza was forced to transform because he was hurt. His Kamehameha did what it was supposed to do, but it didn't work out as he had intended. Step. With a last stepping sound, Frieza had walked up to Raditz and was looking at him in the eye level. This wasn't because Frieza was now tall, but it was because Frieza was so short and the tall Raditz was sitting on the ground. With his eyes narrowed, Frieza stared at Raditz. Raditz was panting but still stubbornly staring at him, his face without the slightest fear, only a stable calmness. Frieza didn't like those eyes at all, so he raised his tail. Snap! And immediately tail smacked Raditz on the head, collapsing him into the ground. Boom! Raditz's body was lying down in the crater, his head was bleeding profusely. He was gritting his teeth in pain, but he didn't say a word nor did he move out of the way, which didn't make sense to Frieza. Raditz wasn't even transformed going by his hair. His body was in his base form, yet there was one key difference from his natural state. Within his dark eyes a grey glow was starting to flash. It was extremely unstable, but it was stubbornly not going out. Why don't you fight back, monkey? Are you giving up now? But Frieza was disappointed as Raditz didn't speak a word. He simply panted from exhaustion and kept gazing up in the air from his collapsed position. Did I break your head from that last attack? How pitiful. Raising his feet, Frieza clenched his teeth and with full force, boom, stepped on Raditz's chest, causing him to spit out blood from the internal shock. Fight back, monkey. Boom. Another stomp and Raditz's ribs creaked. Frieza was standing above Raditz and kept stomping on him again and again. his eyes cruel and his intentions crueler. Boom. Gah. Raditz's chest had several deep red gashes. The continuous stumps he was receiving from final form Frieza were damaging him pretty badly. He was in a lot of pain, but his eyes stubbornly refused to close, the gray flashing less and less and becoming more stable by the second. Boom. Kicking away Raditz's body like trash, Frieza looked incensed. How dare this monkey force him to transform, hurt him so badly and now refuse to fight. Unforgivable? You damsien. Whisk. A pink death beam tore through the sky and rushed towards the fallen Raditz. His body was hurting all over and he was unable to retransform into Iacre, so he could only lie there and watch the death beam flash helplessly. Pink was filling his vision and his situation was turning dire by the second. Move, damn it, move. Gritting his teeth, Raditz struggled with all his strength. His eyes kept flashing but he was wholly unaware of the phenomenon. He wanted to move, that was the only thing in his mind right now. Sadly, he was late, the death beam was upon him and he could now feel its sizzling heat against his skin. It was an unavoidable attack. But, twist. Out of nowhere his tense body relaxed and twisted out of the death beam's way. What? Raditz's eyes went wide with surprise at the current turn of events. He found himself doing a handstand in a relaxed fashion. His body was still hurting but he could easily ignore that in this lax state of mind. This is Master Roshi's style. It didn't take long for Raditz to realize what this was. This was Master Roshi's brand of Ultra Instinct that he had copied before. And he seems to have finally found the key to unlocking this state. It's the desire to move yet not consciously moving. This middle ground is when Ultra Instinct begins to act. With Raditz's realization, the gray glow finally stopped flickering and settled in completely. Pushing himself off the ground with a simple flick of his fingers, Raditz landed on the ground in one smooth motion. His actions had a type of natural beauty to them, something which Frieza understood at a base level but couldn't understand why it felt that way to him. What are you doing, monkey? I am not opposed to a monkey show, but now is not the appropriate time, don't you think? Frieza mockingly asked Raditz. His polite smile had returned to his face. He was already at 50% and his 60 million power level was giving him confidence to control the situation. But Raditz had already stood up and was currently patting himself down, clearing the dust staining his white armor. You know, Frieza, I wanted to tell you something before. This final form of yours is much better than your previous forms. With his eyes narrowed, Frieza stared at Raditz, then straightened his face and began laughing. Ho ho ho, flattery will get you nowhere, Xian. I no longer need savages like you dirtying my territory. With a smile of his own, Raditz ignored Frieza and started shadow boxing, slowly getting used to his incredible movement speed. I am not telling you this because I want to flatter you or work under you, Frieza. I am saying this because dash. Whoosh. Frieza's eyes went wide as Raditz flashed before him with ferocious grin on his face. It would be a shame if you break down too easily. Boom. Ayak. Blood came flying out of Frieza's mouth as he felt Raditz's knee slam into his stomach. His insides felt as if they were shredded to pieces. The sheer focus behind the attack was so immense that Frieza took more damage in this one hit than he had taken in his lifetime. This goddamn Xian? Chapter 68 Healer. As soon as Vegeta regained consciousness, he jumped. Frieza. Huff huff huff. Breathing heavily, Vegeta looked around and found himself in a white dome-like house. There were some Namekians on his side. A child amongst them seems to have healed him just now. Immediately pointing his hand towards the child, Vegeta gathered a ki blast, startling every Namekian, but he didn't care one bit. You there, you better start talking. What just happened? Vegeta's words only brought more indignation from the Namekians. This man was obviously evil, but they had promised Raditz to heal him. Maybe Raditz was mistaken because there was no way this guy could be a partner of their savior. The child in question was frightened and spoke in a shaking voice. I am Dende. The Xian King asked us to heal you. I was just healing you, said Dende, who this time around seems to have miraculously survived the massacre. Well, it wasn't much of a miracle because many others had died in this scenario too. Lowering his hands, Vegeta gritted his teeth. He felt incredibly angry at being reminded he was no longer royalty. But he had more important things to do than kill all these idiots and show them their place. TCH. Clicking his tongue, Vegeta got up with narrowed eyes and squeezed his gloved fist with concentration. A Zenkai boost. Concluded Vegeta in a low voice. His power had shot all the way up to 500,000, if he was sensing this right. He had already learned how to sense ki after his battle on Earth and had a pretty good idea he was around the strength of Frieza, when Frieza was torturing him. Damn. Remembering Frieza, Vegeta cursed in frustration. He wanted to go and kill Frieza himself, but there was one thing stopping him from doing that. What is that power level? What happened to Frieza? Vegeta's loud commands were now starting to bother the Namekians. They were regretting healing this bastard. What a massive piece of garbage. Mori took command of the situation and walked up to Vegeta. Frieza has transformed. The Xian King is fighting against him right now. Raising his eyebrows, Vegeta asked with a startled look. Transformed. Mori nodded, then made a gesture with his hands. Soon a green energy began to shine around them. Before Vegeta could ask what this was, he started hearing voices. Second form. Third form. Final form. Xian King. Fight. These intermittent whispers let Vegeta understand something. This was a recounting of what happened. Mori knew Vegeta might have doubts, and before they could, he threatened. Again, he took the initiative to explain. This is the planet speaking. Some of us are more close to the planet than the others and can ask the planet for help. Vegeta snorted, so this was essentially Namekian magic. This didn't surprise him as these pathetic wastes created the Dragon Balls. You can't do that kind of thing without magic, at least in Vegeta's knowledge. But before any of them could think what to do next, the planet began whispering again. Cold. Transformed. Allies in danger. The intermittent whispers stopped for a second and restarted again. Allies. Danger. Titsu. Dead. Yamcha. Dead. Tien. Danger. With a frown, Vegeta got up from his bed and turned towards Muri. What is this planet of yours muttering about? Cold? Who's that? Muri, with a deep sense of powerlessness, cancelled the connection with Namek. He knew about this himself. Namek is likely talking about King Cold. He was fighting the Sun King with Frieza last we saw him. Sun King should have scared him away. Vegeta started walking out of the house after hearing that. He wasn't scared away. If it's Cold, that bastard is planning to use the Earthlings as bargaining chip against Raditz. That fool, he has no idea. Raditz as a Sun has no interest in saving the Earthlings whatsoever. Vegeta's words failed to resonate with the Namekians. There was absolutely no way the Sun King was evil. Vegeta was simply in a world of his own, disconnected from reality, is what almost all the Namekians thought. But Vegeta wasn't interested in talking further. He was sensing Kakarot and another big energy signature there. That must be Nappa. With a bloodthirsty smirk, Vegeta blasted off towards the location of Cold. He was incapable of fighting against Frieza, although he would have gone there nonetheless. Now that Cold, Nappa, and Kakarot were here, he had a different set of priorities. First he'll go and kill Cold, then Nappa, and then Kakarot. If chance presents itself, he'll kill both Raditz and Frieza with a sneak attack as well. I am Prince Vegeta. I am the only worthy Sun. With a ferocious smile, Vegeta speeded up, his heartfelt words blowing in the air. Raditz, I will take back my rightful place, you hear me? With Vegeta gone, the Namekians breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at each other. It was a question of what was to be done, and Muri seems to have already thought of something. Half of us should go help the Sun King's allies against Cold. If that man is right and Cold threatens Sun King with his partners, he will be forced to compromise. We have to make sure the King's partners are safe. Muri's words got many mumblings started in the Namekians. They knew the Sun King was their last line of defense. Once he fell, they will fall together with him. It wasn't because of hesitation that they were mumbling, it was because of belief. I'll go to the Sun King, said Dende. This was the source of their hesitation, because before Vegeta woke up, they had already spoken to the planet once. And the planet had told them that the Sun King was injured greatly. So they were in a tough spot. Their idea was to heal Vegeta, the King's partner, and tell him about the King's problem. But after watching Vegeta's attitude, they wisely thought against it. Vegeta would no doubt kill the Sun King any chance he got, which left only one option to them. One of us has to go and help the Sun King. Dende, this is about your life too. Are you sure you want to do this, child? Dende was afraid yet firmly nodded. He was a healer and he would help the King as best as he could. The King was fighting to save them and Namekians weren't a heartless bunch. Muri finally nodded and patted Dende on the head, asking one of the stronger Namekians to go with him. Giri, please take Dende to the Sun King. Leave it to me, said Giri, after which the remaining group decided to go towards Cold. They also had a healer. They will try to keep the King's partners alive as much as possible. Chapter 69 Goku vs King Cold. Titsu. Tien cradled Titsu's burnt body. A large hole had been punched through him and he was gone for good. Tien was so angry holding his best friend's body that his energy spiked from sheer emotion. Although it wasn't a power-up like Suns might receive in this situation, it was giving him a considerable adrenaline boost. You bastard! Tien snarled at Cold, but Cold was uncaring about Tien's rage, for he was no longer in his second form but had shifted to his final form. You are talking to me. Cold turned towards Tien and smiled. He wasn't afraid of these insects any longer. He was a prudent man, so before arriving here he made sure to transform all the way to his final form. Was he important to you? How pitiful. I would have left him a whole body if I had known. Cold smirked. His new design resembled Golden Frieza, but he was Snow White in color instead, very similar to Frieza's final form. The only thing that could be said about him was that he was obviously taller than Frieza ever was. Finding that Cold was still pushing his buttons, Tien was about to rush in with rage. Tien, wait. But Goku stopped Tien's charge in time. He too was angry, but Tien would definitely die if he went in there without his support. Tien stopped after hearing Goku's advice. Although he was really angry, he was still a smart man. Goku was right. Going in charging would only let Cold have his way with them. Yamcha and Chitsu were dead. Krillin and Piccolo were incapacitated after dealing with the Ginyu Force. Piccolo especially was instrumental in dealing with Ginyu when Goku and Nappa were trying to hold Cold off. Kakarot. This guy is strong, Nappa said with sweat pouring down his cheek. He knew about Cold, but now he could sense how strong Cold was. That really puts things into a whole new perspective. He and Kakarot were the only ones remaining who could fight this guy. That Namekian was out of the game. Goku was no longer his cheerful self right now. His friends had been killed mercilessly in front of him. I know, we'll make it work somehow, said Goku with a serious face. He took his stance while Cold watched with interest. But his smiling face deformed right after when Goku's fist made contact with his cheek. Boom. Cold was caught off guard receiving Goku's attack. A Kaioken ×4 boosted attack on a 100k wasn't enough to hurt Cold at all, but he was still sent flying from the surprise attack. Goku smiled in a tense fashion after he realized how little his attack did. Go. Nappa rushed towards Cold as well after telling Tien to position himself, but sadly for them Cold wasn't Frieza. Shoo. Nappa looked down with wide eyes, there was a hole in his chest. What? He staggered down and fell face first onto the ground, his heart was pierced through a death beam. Nappa! Gaku exclaimed with shock, his head snapped towards Cold who was walking back with rage written on his face. Cold raised his fingers and they shone right away. Shoo! Flipping out of the way from sheer experience Gaku dodged the attack, his Kaioken saved him from getting death beamed through the heart. Shoo! 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 Cold continued to attack mercilessly and Gaku continued to dodge the death beams fired his way, he was doing a variety of movements to stay as safe as possible. And King Cold had enough of Gaku dodging his attacks. You vile monkey! Whoom! Pointing his finger in the air Cold started floating in the sky, a purple ball of energy was beginning to take shape above his fingers and was it getting bigger by the second. Cold was creating a death ball to finish this whole charade once and for all, Frieza can see it coming and survive in the space just fine. You vile creatures have wasted enough of my time, do you have any idea who I am? I am King Cold, the emperor of this universe? And you are from a third-rate planet yet you dare to attack me. King Cold's death ball was getting bigger and bigger with his rage, Tien and Gaku both knew something had to be done now. Tien was sweating from the sheer intensity of that attack but then he gazed at Chitsu's dead body, and calmed down all of a sudden. Gaku, said Tien in a calm tone, then he continued. Do your best to stop that attack, leave Cold to me. Gaku looked at Tien, then realization dawned on him. Tien don't do it. Shaking his head Tien walked forward with a white aura enveloping his body, he didn't listen to Gaku but said his own thing. You will have one shot at this Gaku, make sure it counts. Before Gaku could stop Tien he flew towards Cold with veins jutting out his whole body. And Cold himself only raised his other hand and pointed towards Tien. Shoo! Ugh! The death beam ran straight through Tien's torso but instead of falling he yelled out. Ah! White aura enveloping Tien flared to maximum capacity as he kept approach Cold with his fastest speed. Cold looked unimpressed and kept firing more death beams. Shoo! 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 Tien's hands, legs, ears everything was shot open but much to Cold's shock he didn't stop. What? Cold exclaimed because Tien was now an arm's reach away from him. He couldn't understand how Tien had rushed all the way here even after so much, he should have collapsed midway long ago. Not bothering with anything, Tien had red blood vessels in his eyes, he had reached Cold and with the maximum strength he could muster. Bam! He tackled Cold into a four-armed hug, a hug which would have broken any other man's spine. Cold himself was only slightly pushed back from surprise. But Tien wasn't disappointed, he didn't expect this to do anything in the first place, his actual attack was something else entirely. This one's for Chitsu. Gaku, do it. Then the world started glowing for King Cold, Tien started emitting blinding light as his whole body shone. Cold could barely make out that Shin rushing in with anger but before he could do anything to stop him, he heard it. Shin. Kikoho. Tien and Chitsu had created a self-destruct technique for a rainy day, while they hoped they never had to do it Tien was using his version right now. It changed all his body's energy into a Kikoho blast, this was the entirety of Tien's potential in one single blast. Everything from his body to ki was Komusted as a focused deadly attack, the energy had nowhere else to escape and was supposed to take down whatever Tien was holding onto. Boom! And if the massive yellow ball of energy that covered the skies was anything to go by, Tien's attack had worked. Bam! Gaku had meanwhile done his part and kicked through the death ball using Kaioken, but his mood was extremely bad. Tien had self-destruct before him, Nappa was dead, Chitsu and Yamcha sacrificed themselves, Gohan and Piccolo were down for the count, and he couldn't do a thing. He was feeling incredibly angry at himself and his inability to fight. Tien. Dropping from the skies Gaku landed on the ground and looked at the yellow ball of energy slowly fading away. He was searching for King Cold's energy when suddenly, die. Cold flashed before him, with burns all over his skin and punched Gaku straight in through the stomach. Gaku wasn't thrown backwards from the punch this time around, because all that force had been taken in by his now absent stomach. His eyes widened but he still gripped Cold's arm with his hands. Ugh! Gaku was visibly overexerting himself trying to push Cold away from him, his hands were gripping as hard as they could but his lower body was now paralyzed. Cold smirked at Gaku's futile efforts and raised his other hand, he pointed his finger straight at Gaku's forehead. Goodbye Shin. Gaku's eyes went wide his body flashed red but Cold's hands were as stable as ever. Gaku gritted his teeth and then out of left field raised his head and, chomp, you. Cold was both shocked and incredibly pissed, this vile monkey just bit his finger? He could feel the saliva on his skin and that pushed him off the edge. Aik. Boom asterisk. Blasting away Gaku using a large energy discharge, Cold looked at his finger dripping with some saliva in anger. Gaku had meanwhile been thrown far away from the blast, and was lying on the ground, he was huffing and puffing with pain. Ha, I made it. Gaku still managed to laugh as he attempted to get his upper body up. He was understanding what Raditz was talking about when he mentioned how it sucked to get a hole punched through you. This reminds me of that time with Piccolo. Laughing with pain Gaku tried to float upwards, he wasn't going to give up so easy. Thud. Gaku's attention was taken in by the tail smash Cold did to the ground. The ground now had an extra crater and a very pissed off Cold, who now going to fire a considerably powered ki blast at Gaku. He seems to be keeping his distance after getting saliva on his fingers, but this wasn't good news for Goku either. Kaioken. Goku tried to do the Kaioken but immediately failed. He spat out blood. His injured body wasn't able to take the load of Kaioken. Come on, one more time. Just one more time. Goku exclaimed, but he was in deep trouble because Cold had already fired the energy ball towards him. Cold wasn't one to going to give this Saiyan any more chances. Chapter 70 Gohan. Cold's attack was rushing straight towards Goku, who was attempting to crawl away using his elbows and get out of the range. But the speed he had was simply not enough. His hands were also losing consciousness, so Goku did what Goku does best and used the situation to push his creativity. After bracing himself, Goku opened his mouth and started concentrating. A small ball of blue Kamehameha was starting to form inside Goku's mouth. He was mimicking Raditz and Nappa's mouth blast for this, because his hands were trashed and his legs were paralyzed. Goku was using the only thing he could. His cheeks were beginning to bulge and blue light was shining from within them. After his cheeks puffed up completely like a squirrel, Goku looked at the blast funnily and opened his mouth wide. With Goku's shout, the Kamehameha wave was fired straight out of his mouth and rushed towards the purple energy ball. And began clashing with the thing, trying to push it back. Cold only smirked at the spectacle and thrusted his clawed hand forward, telekinetically pushing his attack forward, which overwhelmed Goku's almost immediately, but Goku used the sheer recoil of the clash to throw his injured body out of the way. Boom! Once again Cold missed Goku because of the latter's ingenuity. Goku was huffing and in a lot of pain but smiling nonetheless. He raised his head and looked at Cold with his eye closed. That eye had been hit with a sharp rock and was currently bleeding. Goku was trying to get up one more time and his repeated trials were somehow starting work. His hands were gaining a little bit of consciousness back, enough for him to raise himself slightly, but that was not helpful at all. He is strong, be careful. Out of nowhere Goku said with a half-tired laugh, and Cold was looking at him with a questioning face. Was this Saiyan telling him to be careful of himself? What are you babbling on about, Saiyan? Cold's words had only one answer. Boom! A yellow energy flash detonated above Cold's head instantly, covering the area in a hemisphere of pure energy. And the person who did that attack was flying in the sky with his tail coiled around his waist safely. Dad, are you alright? Exclaimed Gohan from above. He had picked himself off the ground and one could see that clearly. Gohan's clothes were torn in multiple places, one of his hands was hanging limp on the side but he was still standing. I will make it, son. What happened to Piccolo? Goku said as he collapsed down with relief. He was no longer trying to push himself off the ground because his son was here, and he had full confidence in his son's ability. Goku had seen the bursts of power Gohan had in the gravity chamber. Gohan had a potential so large that if Gohan used it now they could beat King Cold instantly. Those flashing green eyes and that golden hair Gohan displayed once a while gave Goku a feeling even Raditz couldn't beat him in that state. Dad. Gohan had flown down and picked up Goku with concern. But he knew now they had more important things to discuss. Mr. Piccolo has woken up. He is talking to a group of Namekians. I came here after sensing your energy, Dad. Goku nodded with a tired smile. He asked about Piccolo and not Krillin because he could sense Piccolo was moving around and Krillin was likely still knocked out. But Goku felt Gohan had another thing to say. What is it, son? Gohan was a bit upset when remembering what went down a while ago, but being the polite kid he was, Gohan said lightly. The Namekians didn't come alone, Dad. They had me. I came with them. Do you have something to say about that boy? An arrogant voice cut off Gohan's words and caused the father-son duo to look up. There stood Vegeta with a malicious smirk on his face. That's Vegeta, said Goku to himself. He had heard about Vegeta from his brother and Nappa, but this is the first time he was seeing him in person. Vegeta quickly landed beside him and that caused Gohan to tense up, because Vegeta had already attacked Piccolo once before coming here. But Vegeta only snorted with his malicious smirk in place. If I wanted to do something to your pathetic dad I would have done so, boy. But I no longer need to dirty my hands. Your dad is going to die by himself, it seems. Hearing that, Gohan stood up and snapped at Vegeta. No, Dad won't die. Snorting proudly, Vegeta ignored the foolish ramblings of the boy and turned towards the direction Gohan had fired his attack in. Then began confidently walking towards Cold's energy signature. Cold was for some reason not moving from his place, because the thing is, although Cold wasn't dead yet, Gohan's burst of energy had hurt him a lot. Even Gohan didn't know, but his attack was powered by his raw latent potential. When Gohan found his dad was on the verge of death, he snapped. His hair had turned golden for a split second. But that was enough to cause some serious harm to Cold. This kind of potential explosion was a big factor in taking down the original Raditz as well. Gohan's potential bursts were one of the most deadly things in his arsenal. He went from 1 to 1300 plus against original Raditz, his potential boom against Cell, potential unlock against Bu, and then finally Beast Gohan. These were the most prominent display of Gohan's abilities. This time around Cold was added to the list of people who were unfortunate enough to make Gohan mad. Whoosh. But Vegeta didn't know any of that. He only felt that Cold seemed hurt and was trying to recover, and Vegeta wouldn't give him the time to do that. Watching Vegeta leave, Goku looked serious and turned towards Gohan. Son, listen carefully. Gohan didn't know why his dad became serious all of a sudden but went to support him nonetheless. He had grown a lot as a person and was far more confident than he ever was. These few months with his dad had done more for his confidence than his entire life up to now did. And one of the things he learned from his dad was courage and responsibility. Just like Goku once refused to revive because everyone would be in danger due to him being there, Gohan adopted that sense of responsibility in himself too. If he could help in any way he would do so to the best of his abilities, and from what he was hearing, his dad seems to have a plan that just might work. A/N. You can now support me on Patreon. Chapter 71. Frieza's teeth rattled and the inside of his mouth tasted blood, yet his supernatural durability allowed him to continue fighting. Snap! His neck received a swift kick which caused it to snap sideways and throw his body back from the whiplash alone. And Raditz, who just gave the harsh kick, landed on the ground and looked around with a frown. Nappa. His energy signature vanished. Damn it. Clenching his fist, Raditz calmed himself. Nappa was now dead and Goku's energy signature has been unstable for a while now. Meanwhile another energy signature has been fluctuating wildly. Raditz could sense that was Gohan. Gohan. He's close, he might unlock it before any one of us can. Raditz mumbled, then turned to look at a particular direction and flew away. After his last attack on Frieza he had a bit of time on hand, and he needed that time to fix something. Currently there were two Namekians trying to make their way here. The duo will be in grave danger if they come and he'll be unable to fight at his full capacity with them messing around. So Raditz decided to go and give them a warning. His last kick should leave Frieza on the ground for a bit and Frieza can't sense energy. That'll give him enough time to get this done. Swish. Raditz suddenly appeared before the two Namekians. They were a boy and an older man. The duo were startled and fell back from shock, but realizing who was here they exclaimed from happiness. Sun King. Bowed Dende and Gyuri. Raditz gestured at them to rise and with a frown he questioned them. Why are you here? I won't be able to protect you if Frieza targets you again. Leave. Warned Raditz, but Dende quickly walked up to Raditz and clenched his fists. Sun King, we are here to help. That man was not reliable. We decided to not tell him about your location, or he might have hurt you. So that's what it is. Rubbing his eyebrows, Raditz grumbled internally, so that was why Vegeta didn't come here and went directly towards Cold. Raditz was planning on taking a break when Vegeta arrives, but that was a bust now. Dende, not knowing that, continued with his words, but he was a lot quicker now that he knew danger was still around. Sun King, you are hurt. I can heal you. That got Raditz to stop. Yes, was Dende capable of healing? That was how Vegeta received his Zenkai boost in canon. This was good news. Folding his hands, Raditz sat down without hesitation and the gray faded from his eyes. This caused him to flinch due to the kickback he just received. But Dende was smart enough to not waste time and raised his hands. A warmth spread across Raditz's body which greatly relaxed him. Man, that hits the spot. I was barely capable of sitting straight before this, thought Raditz. His body was slowly being repaired and he was feeling a spike in energy with each passing second. This was a Zenkai boost, the thing that pushed Goku all the way up to 3 million in original, and if Raditz's feelings were correct, 6 million, that's what this boost will push me to. Understanding that, Raditz relaxed and let Dende do his thing. After a while longer his energy stabilized around 6 million. Dende was done healing Raditz, who narrowed his eyes and stood up with his aura flaring to life. Frieza is searching for me again. He might get impatient and blow up the planet if he doesn't find me. Now run along, and thank you for your help. If you need anything from the Suns, do let me know. Whoosh. Flying away with his eyes shining yellow, Raditz smiled. This Zenkai boost not only increased his power, it also let his body adapt to a 10 times boosted a carry. Now he was equal to final form Frieza, who didn't go super buff, or his 100% full power mode as he called it. We are both at 60 million, now what will happen if one used Ultra Instinct and one didn't? A carry boosted up to 10 was something that came to Raditz naturally now, so he was curious if he could use Ultra Instinct on top of that. After closing his eyes for a second, Raditz opened them again. His eyes were still yellow, but he was now in Ultra Instinct state. I can? And it's like I am not even using it. As soon as he turned Ultra Instinct on, Raditz's speed increased by multiple folds and he arrived before the angry Frieza in a few seconds. Aiaic. And greeted him with a punch to the stomach that managed to make Frieza's eyes go white. His heart stopped beating immediately and his consciousness blanked out. But Frieza's insane durability kicked in once more and his consciousness returned right after. But that couldn't be said about the integrity of his body. AAA? Ugh. Stumbling backwards with his face morphing into pure shock, Frieza held his stomach with pain. He wanted to tell Raditz how hard he was going to destroy him, but Frieza couldn't even stand still anymore. Bang! Falling down from the sky, Frieza crashed to the ground, where he kept spitting and tried to stabilize himself. He was in so much pain that even his durability was having a tough time keeping him straight. What's the matter, Frieza? Cat got your tongue. Frieza was done. He was no match for him anymore. Raditz was certain he could take Cold and Frieza together by now. Smiling with his hands folded, Raditz looked at Frieza but then stopped right in his tracks, his head turned towards a direction with shock. Piccolo, his signature vanished. As if one cue, the Namek skies began to rumble, clouds were starting to gather, occasional bolts of lightning were forming in the sky and the winds were almost beginning to form a typhoon. Both Raditz and Frieza had stopped fighting due to the crazy spectacle and were looking at that direction. Frieza knew something big was happening, and Raditz, he could sense something else entirely. This was the birth of a legend. Someone has reached that state. Someone was close to becoming a Super Saiyan. A/N. Advanced chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 72 Super Saiyan Gohan, you absolute madlad, you went ahead, did it. Step. Raditz landed on the ground beside Frieza with a light sound. Smiling at the fallen Frieza, Raditz bent down and looked Frieza straight in the eye. Frieza, do you feel that? Do you know what that is? Snap. Grabbing the tail smack thrown his way, Raditz smiled and squeezed Frieza's tail hard enough for him to flinch. As if not even minding the attack, Raditz continued. That Frieza is the birth of a Super Saiyan. Frieza's eyes widened as if asking in shock, there is another. But he was so badly hurt he couldn't speak out right now. Raditz didn't mind the lack of response and continued with a smile. No, it's not what you think, Frieza. I am different from him, he's a Super Saiyan. Pointing towards himself, Raditz smirked. I am the legendary Super Saiyan. Ironic, isn't it, how alike we are, the born king of a species. The one standing above all. It's a shame we had to fight Frieza. I wouldn't have minded joining hands with you. Raditz's words had Frieza's grit his teeth and glare at Raditz. Die, monkey. Then out of nowhere, Frieza raised his hand and released a massive energy blast straight at Raditz's face, who before Frieza's shocked face, twisted his body in a smooth way and dodged the blast. How did you know? Frieza spoke in absolute terror. It was as if they had practiced this move before, as if this was just a performance to Raditz. This was supposed to be a sneak attack when the monkey was busy holding onto his tail, yet he moved as if Frieza was so easy to read. It infuriated Frieza. Boom. Receiving an elbow to the head, Frieza's spat bud as his purple armored skull caved in. Collapsing into the dirt once again, Frieza's veins popped. Unaware of Frieza's increasingly furious looks, Raditz towered over Frieza and spoke in a soft tone. Your attacks will never connect, Frieza. Your time is over, you dash. What? Raditz's eyes went wide. Frieza's palms, which were supporting the ground, began glowing dangerously. Frieza, who was looking down on the ground, had fury filling his face. His veins were bulging and his energy spiking. Go to hell, Saiyan? Godash. Frieza's stomach was immediately kicked. Raditz's hard Saiyan boots cracked Frieza's spine with only the distributed impact. With his eyes wide and mouth opening in pain, Frieza's body ragdolled into the air and the gathering energy was released into the air. Boom! After skidding on the dirt ground for a while, Frieza came to a stop and stopped moving. He was now out cold. Raditz meanwhile wiped his sweat and thanked Rashi for his ultra instinct again. This technique is the bane of all sneak attacks. He almost pulled a golden Frieza on me, sheesh. Wiping away his sweat and nervousness, Raditz went to get Frieza. He could feel an intense battle taking place on another side of Namek right now, and he wanted to be there for it. Gohan had done it and Raditz wanted to know how he had done it. I still can't get myself to transform. My hair hasn't turned yellow no matter what I try. Could this be the side effect of relying on Uzuru? Raditz wondered as he picked Frieza up by the throat and carried him on his shoulder like luggage. He was in Ultra Instinct and didn't worry about any sneak attacks, so carrying Frieza wasn't a problem. Frieza will meet his end before the Saiyans. Frieza might not be a problem anymore, but Super Saiyan. TCH. Raditz had control over his Uzuru and had mastery over his ki, so Raditz could use Iakri in a calm and controlled fashion, but Broly triggered it via rage. Yet even with all that rage in him, Broly didn't transform even once. It was when he finally lost his father that something clicked inside him. Whoosh. Flying away with Frieza in tow, Raditz wondered what was the reason behind this. Broly obviously had enough S-cells. He did go Super Saiyan right after Paragas's death. But even with all conditions technically fulfilled, he didn't transform, no matter how much he raged out in a carry. Great Ape and Super Saiyan might truly be opposite to each other. Gohan had trouble going Super Saiyan and he was born with a tail. Goten and Trunks could go Super Saiyan easily, but they lost their tails. Same for Universe 6 Saiyans. They evolved out of tails, be it Kaba, Caulifla or Kale. Each had enough S-cells by default. Yet every Saiyan with a tail in Universe 7, be it Goku, Vegeta, Broly or Gohan, had much harsher conditions to go Super Saiyan. Raditz was beginning to think the longer he relied on a carry, the more he was going to have trouble transforming. But a carry's boost is much higher than that of Super Saiyan. And I am born with a tail, so it won't matter much even if I get rid of it now. I'll only be making it hard for myself. Tail or no tail, as long as a Saiyan had one at birth, they'll have to work extra hard to go Super Saiyan, so Raditz decided he might as well concentrate on a carry until he figured out a way to go Super Saiyan. Boom. Narrowing his eyes, Raditz speeded up. The clash was close and he could feel a fiery aura boom with every attack. Gohan was going crazy and Raditz could even see it now, the yellow aura surrounding Gohan and the sheer power he was emitting. This was a transformation of epic proportions, and Gohan was the first one to unlock it after all these years. If not for Broly's existence, he might be the Saiyan with most potential. And after Gohan Beast, even that could be debated. A/N. Advanced chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 73 Deceit, you damn monkey. Boom. 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 Cold panted and kept firing ki blasts at Gohan, who before his eyes kept swatting them all away like flies. Cold was sweating. How did this boy become so strong? Is he also a Super Saiyan? Gah. Cold eyes popped comically when Gohan vanished from his vision and he received a kick straight to his chest, cracking his bones and rattling his internal organs inside his body. Now Cold was scared. He might really die here. Wait. Please wait. Backing away in the air, Cold waved his hands. He was begging Gohan to stop and was thinking of buying some time. But to his surprise, Gohan actually stopped and hesitated. which Cold caught with his years of experience and capitalized on it instantly. This boy was a fool? Wait, Xian? Please forgive me, I didn't mean to kill the Namekian, I swear it was an accident. Watching Gohan hesitate, the almost dead Vegeta was so angry that he raised himself off the ground using sheer anger. After spitting the blood clogging his windpipe, he began breathing hard and warned, "Idiot! Kill him? Don't hesitate, he will not stop at anything to destroy you if you let go of him now." Huff huff. Kakarot, tell your son to finish him off. Vegeta turned towards Goku and asked him to knock some sense into his boy, but watching even Goku hesitate, Vegeta almost died from anger. Looking at Goku, who was now healed, well above his 50k, and was wondering if he should let Cold go, Vegeta barked, "You absolute buffons! Kill him!" Vegeta punched the ground from pure rage. Vengeance was so close, yet these two fools were letting it slide straight out of their palms. Goku frowned from indecision, then turned towards Vegeta and said, "If he comes back, we'll just beat him again. Gohan has become super strong." Spitting more blood clogging his throat, Vegeta berated the father-son in a harsh tone. "He doesn't have to defeat you to win. Not everyone plays nice, Kakarot. Cold will destroy your planet when you aren't around." Cough. He'll kill your loved ones before your eyes. Huff. You wouldn't be able to do a thing. Vegeta was trembling while remembering the destruction of planet Vegeta. He felt like breaking down remembering the wounds his pride has received all these years. What he wouldn't do to kill those two, and this boy was just letting him go. Kakarot too? All this while Cold remained quiet and kept a begging face. He was looking extra repenting. This caused Gohan to finally falter. Cold caught that and trembled. He spoke while slowly approaching Gohan. Thank you, Gohan. I will always remember dash. Snap asterisk. Gohan's eyes went white with a sharp pain in the neck. Boom. And he crashed down at the ground, knocked out of his Super Saiyan state. Gohan. Goku screamed and instantly rushed towards Gohan, grabbing him and rolling away from the death beam, which would have killed him if it hit. Cold smirked, looking down on the ground. His death beam missed, but he had done it. He had done it. Hoo-hoo. Laughing lowly in a voice filled with excitement, Cold then started laughing loudly. Ha 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 ha. He did it? He defeated that Saiyan. Now all he has to do is kill these pathetic worms and take down the Saiyan King with Frieza. Ignoring the glaring Goku, whose hair was fluttering upwards for a bit now, Cold turned towards Vegeta. "Oh Vegeta, you said so many hurtful things about me." Rushing towards Vegeta with a bloodthirsty smile, Cold screamed with fury. "Die for your sins, monkey." Goku's eyes went wide. Cold moved too quickly for him to catch up while he was busy cradling Gohan. He couldn't stop him in time even if he wanted to. But watching Cold do a flip mid-air and rushing towards another direction caused Goku's blood to run cold. "Krillin, get out of the way." Goku raised his hand involuntarily. He yelled with all his might, which made Cold smile successfully. Cold was a sly man. He knew the previous prince was already out of the game, but that remaining Saiyan, he was dangerous. He was not only the brother of the Saiyan King, he was also the father of that boy, so Cold did what he does best, catch the weakness of the enemy and defeat them with one swift attack. The monkey always deflected any stray key blasts going your way. "Let's see you deflect this, monkey." Raising his foot, Cold threw a swift kick. His designation? Krillin's head. "Cold, don't do it, stop." Goku yelled out with anguish and rage, but he couldn't take Cold even with Kaioken, and Cold was already ready to kill. He could only stare in rage as Cold's foot reached Krillin's head. Boom. Advanced chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 74, Cold's demise. Goku yelled desperately, but Cold's foot had already reached Krillin's head and boom, a bloody body flew, but weirdly Goku didn't have rage on his face anymore. He only stared with wide open eyes. Brother. Because the body that went flying with blood splashing all over wasn't Krillin's. Boom. It was Cold's, who was kicked in the head by Raditz and was now currently resting in a newly formed crater. Landing besides the unconscious Krillin, who didn't know he just survived certain death, Raditz turned towards Goku and nodded. "Kakarot, how's Gohan?" I sensed his aura flare up. Picking himself and Gohan up, Goku swiftly flew towards Raditz and Krillin. And while Goku came flying, Raditz looked at his surroundings and pursed his lips. The Namekians were lying dead, and so was Piccolo. Piccolo's body was pierced multiple times. He looked like Cold took his time with him, but the rest of the Namekians had their share too. Burn holes were cauterized before Piccolo could regenerate from them, but even with that, the large gaping wound on his forehead must have been the finishing blow. So that's what made Gohan transform. Shaking his head internally at the Namekian's plight, Raditz turned towards Vegeta and raised his hand. Vegeta coughed once and began floating towards Raditz telekinetically. Goku carrying Gohan and the floating Vegeta reached Raditz one after the other. Goku laid Gohan besides Krillin and Raditz kept Vegeta besides Gohan. Gohan's become super strong, but Cold lied and sneak attacked him. Told Goku with a frown. Raditz nodded and then spoke to the fallen Vegeta. "Vegeta, you powered up quite a bit since the last time I saw you." Raditz. Looking towards another direction, Raditz didn't wait for Vegeta's reply and raised his hands again. A large body flew towards them telekinetically. It was Nappa's. Thump. Depositing the dead body of Nappa before him, Raditz looked at him with sadness. Nappa was the first person to follow him, yet he was unable to save him. Bending down, Raditz put his palm over Nappa's wide open eyes and closed them softly. The last thing he wanted to see was Nappa's shocked face frozen forever. Now Nappa was finally lying peacefully, but Raditz felt many emotions. Nappa was gone, but he remained. Did Cold do this? asked Raditz in a low voice, to which Gaku nodded his head. Nobody here was in the mood to make small talk anymore, so everyone let Raditz mourn a bit for Nappa. Vegeta was dying to ask why Frieza was still on Raditz's shoulder and still breathing, but he didn't speak either. Raditz wasn't Kakarot. He knows who should be spared and who shouldn't. Vegeta didn't have any worries with Raditz taking the lead, because he might not like it, but when Raditz stopped hiding himself, he knew the man was a qualified king. Let's end this. Kakarot, wake your son up. Vegeta, pick yourself up and act like the elite you are. It's time we finish off the father and son. Taking Frieza's unconscious body, Raditz raised his hand and threw Frieza like a ball. Frieza went flying through the sky and crashed straight beside Cold, who was attempting to pick himself off the ground. Boom. Frieza's landing in the crater caused Cold to flinch, thinking it was an attack, but his veins popped seeing it was his son. Damn. You? Cold gritted his teeth. Frieza had also started coughing. This fall had jolted him back to consciousness and he was trying to get his bearings back. Raditz, was the first thing Frieza said as he picked himself up while growling through his clenched teeth. His eyes were bloodshot from the anger and humiliation he was feeling. Son. Although Cold didn't say anything, the tone of his voice let Frieza know. He was warning Frieza to cool his anger and was telling him to attack together. This was something they used to do when Frieza was young. It's been more than a century since he had to follow Cold to attack someone. This reminded him to his comparatively weaker days, which infuriated him. Nothing about this situation sat right with Frieza. How dare these monkeys do this to him? How dare these idiots raise their heads before him? And most of all, how dare you? Starting at Cold, Frieza put his palm before his father's shocked face and screamed with anger. How dare you order me around? Wait, Frieza dash. Boom. A massive pink energy wave atomized Cold's upper body, catching him off guard at Frieza's sudden attack. Frieza had powered up to his 100% full power right before this attack. He did this with sheer force of will and his insane talent made it happen. That was just how much of a monster Frieza was. Meanwhile, the remaining Saiyans were deeply shocked at the display. Frieza killed Cold? Didn't expect that, but then again, it should have been obvious. Raditz mumbled. This made his work a hell of a lot easier at least. Vegeta began laughing and coughing at the spectacle and spat at Gaku and the now conscious Gohan. Ha. Haha, he even killed his own father. Do you see it now, Kakarot? Gaku frowned Frieza's actions but didn't speak out. He had already understood what Vegeta meant a while ago. But this scene hit Gohan really hard. He was young and never saw something this brutal happening. Killing one's father with their own hands is something that was foreign to Gohan. So much so that his hair turned yellow again imagining Gaku dying because of his failure a while before. Gohan had once more managed to trigger Super Saiyan using his rage. And now due of his actions, Frieza needed to face both Raditz and Super Gohan together. But Frieza himself didn't seem to think so. It's all because of your filthy Saiyans. All because of you. Angrily Frieza raged out, his energy cratering the earth he stood on. Although his situation seemed dire, he was Lord Frieza. He was the emperor of the universe. The Saiyans might be shaken from his act of cruelty, but it gave him relief. The stacks were against him? To hell with it. He was the one who made the rules, Lord Frieza, and he had just made a new rule. All Saiyans must die. A/N. Advanced chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 75 Super Gohan. Frieza's actions were harsh, but this was just how Frieza worked. After getting rid of Cold, he managed to calm his anger down, and was now staring at Raditz. Frieza's organs might have been torn and his bones might be shattered, but neither his species nor he himself knew when to quit. Picking himself off the ground, Frieza started to float in his buff form, his dense muscles keeping his shattered bones in place. Glaring at Raditz and Gohan, Frieza spat with resentment. Super Saiyan this, Super Saiyan that, I am sick of all you Saiyans. Rage overflowed from Frieza. He was in pain and was extremely upset over these monkeys jumping around before him. This planet, these monkeys, the Dragon Balls, everything can go to hell. He might try to do something drastic again, thought Raditz. He had already stopped Frieza once from destroying Namek. He could do it again. The only reason Frieza was still alive was so he can meet his end before the Saiyans. Raditz could end him anytime and so could Gohan. Frieza's actual threat was significantly lower to Raditz, so now the question arose, who should be the one to end Frieza? Raditz didn't mind doing it, but before he could suggest something, Gohan took initiative. Uncle Raditz, I want to defeat him. Gohan was shaken up and wasn't in a very good mood. He didn't master Super Saiyan yet, so anger was still predominant in his mind. Although Gohan would never hurt anyone, be it Cell or Frieza, he could at least defeat them until they can't fight anymore. After that, Raditz will take care of Frieza depending on the situation. Thinking that, Raditz waved his hand towards Gohan. Fine, you do that. Let's see how a Super Saiyan fights. Thank you, Uncle Raditz. Whoosh. Rushing towards Frieza, Gohan punched out, in response to which Frieza countered back. An angry buff Frieza was fighting a shining golden Gohan. Frieza was still going to get his fair share of golden PTSD, it seems. Boom. 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 An intense battle was taking place. Super Gohan was a slightly stronger than Frieza at 100% full power, but Frieza was a genius, so the fight was pretty equal. It could tilt either way depending on how Gohan handled the situation, but Gaku had faith in him. Vegeta had sat up by now and was panting while he watched the battle with clenched teeth. Raditz? What did you mean by Super Saiyan before? How can Kakarot's son be a Super Saiyan too? Boom. Aiaic. Vegeta spat blood from the kick Raditz just delivered to his chest. Spitting more blood, Vegeta looked up with anger, but Raditz stared at him coldly. It's not Raditz, that's king for you Vegeta, do not make me repeat myself twice. If you have any problem with my status, fight me and take it back, but before that, act like you understand what you even want to take back. Clenching his teeth with anger, Vegeta glared at Raditz, but he finally didn't talk back. It wasn't that he had turned over a new leaf, but Raditz's words got to him. If he was incapable of following even the most basic Saiyan tradition, what kind of royalty did he even want to become? He'll take his birthright back from Raditz the Saiyan way. This was a matter of pride. Watching Vegeta keep mum, Raditz nodded to himself. Good, the prince had realized his current position. Good, now that I have made myself clear, it's time to talk about that boy. He's indeed a Super Saiyan. Going into a carry, Raditz's eyes went yellow. Pointing towards his eyes, Raditz explained to Goku and Vegeta. I think that might be Super Saiyan. It's the same color as my eyes after all. And after watching the boy transform, I have some new conclusions. I think any Saiyan can go Super Saiyan. Vegeta almost gasped but held it in, and Raditz continued after letting that sink in, emphasizing his current transformation. But what you see here is a different kind of power. Unlike the boy, I can grow stronger endlessly. I do not even know where my limit is at, if I even have one. As far as I can understand, my only limit is my control. Shutting down a carry, Raditz's hair dropped down and he breathed out. Meanwhile, his message had shocked Goku and shaken Vegeta. Dopping his head down for a bit, Vegeta then slowly raised it back. So that's it, getting endlessly stronger. The difference between a legendary Super Saiyan and regular Saiyan. Vegeta was currently trying to comprehend the sheer gap between Raditz and him. Even if Raditz was right and he achieved Super Saiyan the way that boy did, he was still no match for Raditz. The yellow eyes form of him had no known limits. Knowing that Vegeta had received a big hit to his ego, he didn't know what to do anymore. So, that means I can do what Gohan did? Oh boy, that's neat. Goku had a totally different mentality from the collapsed Vegeta. He showed a drastically different outlook to the same scenario, which made Raditz smile. This was why Goku could rise up from a mere single-digit power level to his current 3 million. He simply had a way of looking into things which inspired confidence. And it did inspire confidence. Vegeta's eyes shook and he seems to have found his way again. His collapsed body had found a new support and straightened itself back. Raditz took all that into account and smiled at Goku. You can Kakarot. I think all of us can. I wonder how Gohan did it. It'll be good if he can transform at will. Goku nodded with a proud smile of his own. Yeah, Gohan seemed to be having trouble going Super Saiyan on his own, but it's nothing he can't handle. His faith on his son's ability was obvious to all and Raditz agreed with it. Gohan was much more stable-headed compared to before. He would surely get the hang of it. And when he does, Raditz would follow along and understand how he should go about triggering Super Saiyan himself. But for now, boom. Chapter 76 Other World. An entire day went by peacefully. Namek skies had darkened and were alight once more. Boom. And Gohan was still fighting Frieza. Raditz had long since given up trying to follow the fight. In fact, he just woke up a while ago. Yawning and stretching himself awake, Raditz swept a tear from the corner of his eye and looked up at the skies. Boom. Twitching his lips, he lazily turned towards Goku, who was sitting beside him and eating whatever Bulma had given them yesterday night. Throwing a small rock at Goku's leg, Raditz attracted his attention, then pointed up at the skies. What the hell is that Kakarot? How is he talking so long? Asked Raditz in a tired manner. Gohan was someone who had trouble dealing deadly blows to his opponents, and Frieza was someone who simply won't stand down unless you kill him. In a sense, Frieza was the worst matchup for Gohan. This was simply not a fight the boy can end anytime soon. Goku also seems to know that and laughed in an embarrassed fashion. Gohan, finish the battle quickly, son. Goku yelled at the skies, and Gohan stopped mid-air and exclaimed nervously. Alright. Actually, Gohan was really flustered right now. He had dealt so much damage to Frieza, but the man simply doesn't quit. Frieza didn't give Gohan any chance to think further, and rushed towards the boy with full force. He had tried to destroy the planet more than once and call it quits, but Raditz always stopped him in the nick of time. And Frieza wasn't one to run away with his tail tucked in either, so he had made up his mind to take down as many as he can before going all out against Raditz. But before he can do that, there was one more thing to do. Why don't you die? Which was killing this shitty boy. This goddamn Super Saiyan was simply not giving up. Nobody was winning. Frieza hated this fight with passion. Give up, Frieza. I don't want to have to kill you, said Gohan. Frieza yelled. He was utterly pissed off. It was like this was his own brand of personal hell. A monkey he can't defeat, the gang of them watching him like dance around like a clown, and worst of all, him being shown compassion. It made him want to barf. I'll kill you, you damn Saiyan. Rushing with his aura flaring to life, Frieza punched Gohan in the cheek, and received a similar attack back to his chest. And so the fight continued once more with Raditz smacking his forehead in a speechless fashion. They are back to square one, exclaimed Raditz in disbelief. Vegeta, who kept quiet all this time, snorted at that. He would have gone ahead and ended Frieza himself if he could. But watching Frieza beaten by a Saiyan was still exhilarating to Vegeta, so he stayed to watch. The bald man had long went back in that spaceship of theirs, but he remained here. Raditz shook his head at their reactions. Vegeta and Goku might be willing to entertain Gohan, but Raditz has had enough. An entire day and night should have been sufficient for this fight. Hey, brother. I'll give Gohan 2 more hours tops. This battle has stretched long enough, declared Raditz after he got up. He had rested well and had a job to do now. Hopefully Gohan finished his job before he finishes his. Goku was unsure of the idea but softly nodded nonetheless. Good, I'll be back in while. With his plan decided, Raditz waved at the duo and blasted off towards another direction. Whoosh! Raditz smoothly went out of the battlefield after dodging a death beam fired his way by Frieza. While flying away he was thinking of what to do now. The surviving Namekians have set up shop in Guru's village, hopefully they can do something about the Dragon Balls. With Piccolo and Guru both dead, 2 sets of Dragon Balls were deactivated and nobody could be revived back. If something wasn't done then the entire Z-Fighter cast and the Namekians were dead for good, which would destroy Universe 7 sooner or later in the Tournament of Power. The entirety of Universe 7 had nobody strong enough to fight besides the Z-Fighters. Frieza's reign has destroyed too many strong species and wiped out too many technological races. Raditz figured that was the reason for this universe's low level. In fact, old Raditz himself had wiped out many such species full of potential following the orders of Frieza Force. Brutal stuff. I wonder where Nappa is, mumbled Raditz. He's here, at the check-in station. Suddenly replied a voice which caused Raditz to almost fall down on the ground. Hastily stopping mid-air he looked around with a light coat of sweat. That voice. Launch? Asked Raditz warily while he looked around the empty air, feeling like he was talking to a ghost. It's me. I am talking to you from the other world. I thought you would want to know how everyone was doing. Launch replied inside his head. Hearing her voice, Raditz twitched his lips but calmed himself down. He remembered that King Kai could do something similar and connect telepathically to anyone, anywhere. And Baba was someone he couldn't get a mind read on either, so this must have been the reason. They get this super telepathy ability with their position, probably, or it's a technique. I see, so how's everyone doing? Raditz asked lightly and once again began flying towards the settlement. Launch exclaimed in a bubbly way and kept giving out everyone's status. Piccolo, Tien, Yamcha, and Tetsuo are all going through Snake Way. Kami is dead too, so he took them to King Kai. Raditz nodded. They would surely want to get stronger after how horribly they were killed. And Nappa was about to be sent to hell but I intervened. I can't bend the rules too much so I had to ask King Kai for a favor. Explained Launch as she continued. Raditz put his hand on his chin and wondered aloud. How did you get King Kai to do you a favor? Laughing merrily, Launch exclaimed. I told him a bunch of jokes. He was so happy he signed off the letter without even looking. After a second of silence, both Raditz and Launch laughed loudly. This was such a scam. Launch had learned a lot with Baba. Who knew the sweet girl had this side to her? Chapter 77 Namekian Dragon Balls. Raditz looked around after landing in a semi-ruined Namekian village. Watching the broken buildings his face took on a thoughtful look. Some Namekians were working on broken structures attempting to fix them and make them livable once more. Some older Namekians were trying to keep everything organized and make sure nothing was out of place. But his sudden presence had alerted the still sensitive Namekian colony, so after they realized who was here to meet them, a lot of them left their posts and rushed towards him. Sun King! Exclaimed the Namekian closest to him. The colony of Namekians were bowing before Raditz to show their respect. He was their savior and hope of survival. And Raditz didn't disappoint them. Flicking back his decorative fur which acted as his royal robe, Raditz walked up to the group with confidence. He looked like he had a plan. Forgive my intrusion, I hope I am not interrupting something, spoke Raditz, with a polite yet authoritative demeanor. Although the threat of Frieza was still looming, Raditz didn't want to rush the Namekians either. They were a peaceful race and he needed their help. This wasn't a transaction but a favor for a favor, and he wanted to keep it that way. Now that he was the Sun King he had to maintain political relationships and beautify the image of Suns. To this end, his very first goal were the Namekians. Not at all, King Raditz. Mori replied with an equally polite tone. He seems to have survived the massacre, again, and had taken up the leader role, again. Raditz didn't mind either. It's always good to converse with someone you know. Better be Mori than a rude dude like Nail. Nodding his head in a relaxed fashion, Raditz folded his arms, his yellow glowing eyes and his large build towering over the Namekians. I see. While I understand you have just picked yourselves up, the danger of Frieza is still looming over the planet. Raditz began to tell them exactly what the state of their planet was, and the Namekians listened quietly. They had a magic which let them hear their planet's words, so they knew the planet still felt threatened. After Raditz briefly explained the situation of their planet, it was time for what he wanted to do to fix that. And that's about it. There have been too many massacres on this planet, all of them could have been avoided. Many of my loyal companions have perished in this battle, the nameless Namekian included. Gasps were heard throughout the village. This was the group who had spoken to the nameless Namekian, the one who went by Piccolo nowadays. It's thanks to his sacrifice that they could live, so his death had a great impact on them. He was a good friend. Raditz closed his eyes for a few seconds. This was the Namekian way of paying respects to their fallen companions. After a few more seconds, Raditz opened his eyes and told the Namekians his plight. Elder Mori, Piccolo, and his counterpart Kami were the creator of Earth's Dragon Balls. Their deaths took the Dragon Balls with them. If possible, can one of you reactivate your Dragon Balls? People who shouldn't have died have perished to protect everyone. I hope to give them another chance at life. Now, Raditz had spoken like this was for one reason. He wasn't as charismatic as Goku was and had no way of making sure the Namekians actually helped. So he went his own way and made do with what he had. The words in which Raditz had spun the tale was a trap. The Z-Fighter's sacrifice was shown to be due to saving the planet and nothing else. While it was true that they did fight for the Namekians, it was nowhere near their top priority, but even knowing that, the Namekians were in no position to deny Raditz. Both politically and because of their good-natured heart, this was a request they simply cannot refuse. Mori, being the de facto leader, had a contemplating look to him, and the remaining Namekians whispered amongst themselves. Raditz patiently waited for Mori to complete his thoughts. In the meantime he paid attention to Vegeta's ki, which was flaring up. He attacking Frieza himself, thought Raditz. Sun King. Mori broke Raditz out of his thoughts, then bowed and spoke resolutely. I can reactivate the Namekian Dragon Balls again. Murmurs spread throughout the Namekian group. They had just suffered a catastrophe because of the Dragon Balls, and not many were keen on reactivating them again. Mori knew that too, so he bowed once again and put forward a request. If possible, Sun King, we would like to activate them after you have won. Giving his acknowledgement to Mori with a smile, Raditz agreed right away. No problem, Frieza getting access to the Dragon Balls is something I wish to avoid as well. I as the Sun King give you my word, not only will I protect this planet from Frieza today, from this day forth, the Namekians will be our eternal allies. Taking out a handheld device made by Bulma for long-distance space communication, Raditz handed it to Mori. You can contact me using this, if you have nothing to add. From now on Namek will be under the Sun's protection. Mori held the device with a happy smile. The remaining Namekians were also mostly excited. Some were wondering if reactivating the Dragon Balls was worth the risk. But overall everyone had a positive attitude towards the partnership and exchange of interests. Joining his hands together, Mori gave Raditz the Elder's blessings. I thank you once again, Sun King. I will start the process of reactivating the Dragon Balls. Mori decided to trust Raditz. He trusted that Frieza will be dealt with, and this was his show of support. This action of his might put them in grave danger once more if somehow Raditz was to betray or lose, but the kind-hearted Namekians weren't people who thought like that. Now that they had accepted the Suns as a friend, they will support them to the very end, even if it posed a risk to their lives. Chapter 78 Separate Paths. When Raditz returned to the battlefield, Gohan's fight was already over. But it wasn't Gohan who finished the battle, it was Vegeta. If the smug looks were anything to go by, that is. Raditz leisurely flew over and landed beside the prideful Vegeta. Quietly gazing at him, he expected an valid answer, which Vegeta had to deliver somewhat humiliatingly. He cannot not behave before the king. Humph, this boy was wasting time, so I finished the job for him, said Vegeta without any concern for Gohan. Hearing the valiant mockery, Gohan clenched his fist and looked down. He was feeling useless because he couldn't finish this fight. His dad had told him not to worry and learn from this experience, but he still couldn't help but feel down. Snap. Putting his hand on top of Gohan's head, Raditz smilingly rubbed his spiky hair. You are a Sun, Gohan, a true warrior. Everyone makes mistakes, but we Suns learn from them. Nothing catches us off guard twice, Gohan, nothing. Everyone messes up at one point in their life, but it's our ability to adapt which makes us a warrior race. Always remember that. Encouraging Gohan with a smile, Raditz stopped talking further and gave the kid some time to think. The boy had to figure this out on his own. Raditz didn't want Gohan dropping the Potara thrown his way again, as Ultimate Gohan even. How the hell he managed to not catch an earring moving that slow is a mystery Raditz could never solve. Maybe his need for glasses had started from back then, thought Raditz funnily. So what now? Frieza is eradicated. Where do we go from here? Asked Vegeta with his hands folded. Weirdly enough, he was asking Raditz's opinion on this, which was good progress in Raditz's book. As long as Vegeta keeps in line for a while, he'll do it again and again. Sure, there's always gonna be some Majin Vegeta situations, but Vegeta will slowly get out of that mentality sooner or later. It's a matter of habit. Raditz being the king will sink in soon enough. I have spoken with the Namekians. They'll revive everyone after the Dragon Balls reactivate, explained Raditz after thinking for a while. We don't need to stay here anymore. We can go home. They'll come back on their own. It was the Namekians' job to revive them, and the squad can easily return using one of the Frieza Force's spaceships. If nothing else, Raditz will ask Launch to guide them back home. The Namekian Dragon Balls take a much longer time to reactivate compared to the Earth ones. There is no need to waste time on Namek until then. Finally, it was a real problem to keep the spaceship afloat in all that storm, you know, exclaimed Bulma, not out loud but in everyone's head. Bulma. Goku and Gohan looked around with confusion, and Vegeta was just pissed off. We are up here, Goku, said Krillin, again in everyone's head. But no matter how confused the Suns were or how angry Vegeta was at being spoken to like this, Raditz wasn't surprised. He had experienced this form of communication once with Launch. This was definitely her opening up a channel for Bulma like King Kai did for Goku. Whoosh. By now their spaceship had become clear in the skies just like Krillin had said, and it was preparing to land beside them. Hua. Soon the spaceship reached the grassy plains and 4 mechanical legs popped out of the round ship, supporting its weight in a well-distributed manner. Swish. Opening the spacecraft door, Bulma stepped out and was adult running up to Raditz, who stayed in place and looked on with a smile. As the husband-wife met and softly hugged each other, the rest of the Suns and Krillin gathered as well. Being out of the fight after Ginyu Force, Krillin had a lot of catching up to do. Going up to Goku, Krillin patted his friend's arm and exclaimed, "Man, I saw the recordings. If Gohan hadn't taken control in a pinch, we would have been toast." Looking at Bulma and Raditz, Krillin said with a low voice, "Pissed Goku. I saw another recording." Bulma almost cried that time Raditz was getting beaten up by Frieza, you know dash. Thump. Oh. Krillin rubbed his head and laughed with embarrassment because Bulma had somehow heard him speak, and had just thrown a rock to his head. After scowling at Krillin, Bulma and Raditz decided to change places, but before going out Raditz had one more thing to do. Guys, a little change of plans. We will leave tomorrow. Bulma hasn't been around Namek yet and she wants to do that now. You guys can wait for us or do something else. Raditz had figured it would be Vegeta who would speak out at this change of plans, but weirdly, it was Goku. Are there any strong fighters here? I lost pretty badly before. I really need to one-up my training. Goku seemed almost disappointed that he lost, yet he seemed pretty pumped up to catch up to Gohan and Raditz all the same. But this somehow irked Vegeta. Goku was stronger than him yet he felt he was too weak. This was a feeling Vegeta didn't like, so he lashed out, in his own unique way. You clown, if there were any strong Namekians they would have stopped Frieza themselves. Not minding the insults thrown his way one bit, Goku rubbed his chin and pondered what he should do now. So Raditz thought for a while and suggested the best possible solution right now. Vegeta's right, there aren't any strong fighters remaining on Namek. There was a man named Nail but he was killed by Zarbon a while back. Say Kakarot, if you want to get stronger I know of a planet you can go to. It's called Yadret and it's supposed to be filled with masters of ki and magic. Looking excited at the prospect Goku instantly agreed to the idea. That's great. Alright, I'll be off then. You coming, son? Asked Goku, but Gohan was still a little unsure of his abilities right now. Not being able to finish Frieza really did put a doubt in his mind. I am not sure I can do it, Dad. Smiling with encouragement, Goku picked up his son and sat him on his shoulder, much to the embarrassment of Gohan. Dad, son, you will do just fine. You are a Super Saiyan now. You will do great. Trust me. Although Gohan was still looking down with embarrassment, he slowly nodded his head in agreement, which was all Goku needed. That's the spirit. Let's go. Stopping the father-son for a second, Raditz pointed towards a location. That's where Frieza's main spacecraft is located. Gohan, you know the language, right? I had seen you poking around the translation lab a while back. Gohan nodded, this time with a bit more certainty. He learned the language when he was taking a break from studying and training. Raditz had already expected this result from the genius Gohan, so he gave his permission. Alright, then input Yadret and you are good to go. See you, Kakarot. Gohan. See ya, Raditz. Bye, uncle. Still keeping Gohan on his shoulder, Goku flew towards the Frieza Force spaceship. He was really looking forward to catching up with Raditz and Gohan. Anyone else wants to do their own thing. Vegeta took this opportunity to turn around and started leaving, but before going he informed Raditz. I'll going to Prita. Raising his eyebrows, Raditz questioned. It's almost inhospitable, 60 times Earth's gravity. It's nearly 6 times as much as planet Vegeta. Stopping with his back turned towards Raditz, Vegeta spoke resolutely. I know, and when I am back, I'll take back what's mine. Super Saiyan, my birthright, and my honor, I'll have them all back. After his little speech, Vegeta flew away as well. He would have gone with Raditz, but Goku's sudden training wounded his pride quite a lot. Even that low-class trash had surpassed him and he still didn't feel it was enough. Vegeta wouldn't stand for this level of humiliation. He'll achieve Super Saiyan or he will die trying. This was the mentality Vegeta had right now and he was going to execute it. Watching Vegeta flying away as well, Krillin rubbed his head. Guess I'll train some more then. The gravity room's all mine now. Hey man, can I use your holograms as well? Nodding lightly, Raditz agreed to the request without much resistance, and Krillin could hardly damage Android T even if he used the combat mode of the holograms. Sure thing, I'll be off too then. After watching even Raditz flying away, Krillin grumbled. All alone. Sigh. Well, let's see how customizable the holograms are. Krillin walked in with a carefree smile. He was hardly going to get any training done in a day. He might as well play around with the holograms. Advanced chapters ahead on Patreon. Chapter 79, Impending Doom. Raditz, Bulma, and Krillin had returned to Earth after their visit to Namek. It's been a while since their return and the revived Z fighters had come back as well. Currently Nappa was sitting in the lawn of Capsule Corporation with his king. But Raditz's mind was not on Nappa. He was sitting in a trance pondering over his current situation and Nappa was looking at him with a concerned look. King, we should tell the queen. Nappa almost begged, causing Raditz to look up with an emotionless face. After flinching slightly under Raditz's gaze, Nappa pursed his lips but kept advising anyway. It was a thing of utmost importance. King, maybe the queen can help. It might not be fatal. Closing his eyes with helplessness, Raditz sighed. He isn't sure if going to Bulma can even do something right now. It might be too late. Putting his hand on his chest, Raditz felt his heartbeat. It was a slow yet powerful beat, but this was also the cause of all his troubles. Ack. Flinching out of nowhere, Raditz gripped his chest and collapsed onto his seat with a pained look. King. Nappa ran to Raditz and held him up with panic. There it was. It had started again. Since a week ago Raditz was getting phantom pains in his chest. They didn't pay it much mind at first. Some painful parts was normal during training after all. But as an outside party, Nappa could see it much more clearly. His king's condition was getting worse day by day. Aic. Not able to hold his voice any longer, Raditz was overwhelmed by the increasing pain. He involuntarily screamed. This was something he noticed only yesterday night, that his chest pains weren't an after effect of training. It was something different. Something very different. Did I catch Goku's heart disease or what? But how? Was it on Namek's water? Is that the catastrophe which plagued Namek before? Shit. Clutching his chest with immense pain plaguing his mind, Raditz fell down the chair. He wasn't able to think straight. All he remembered was screaming and being carried somewhere. His hazy mind only cleared up after what he assumed was a few hours. Queen, the king is awake. Raditz heard Nappa's voice and begrudgingly opened his eyes. He was seeing in green right now, not because his vision was gone but because he was inside a healing pod. Letting buoyancy keep him afloat, Raditz relaxed his body. The last thing he needed was a premature heart attack. Raditz, how are feeling? Asked the muffled voice of Bulma. Raditz could see she was standing before the pod and looking at him with concern. But he didn't want to lie to her. He was feeling like shit and was quite possibly going to die within the next few days. His journey was about to reach its conclusion sooner than he had anticipated. No. Shaking his head, Raditz denied feeling any better, which visibly made Bulma tear up just a bit, which she quickly hid and rushed to the computers. You'll be fine. I have taken out blood samples and conducted necessary tests. The results will be out any minute now, said Bulma, getting into her work mode with full concentration, and yet she tried to console both Raditz and her. Because no matter how much she kids herself, Raditz's heart was beating too hard. His strong body was the only reason he didn't immediately get a heart attack. All things pointed towards only one result, that was whatever was happening to Raditz was worsening each passing second. Beep. And just as she anticipated, the scanner gave a beep and printed a report. Tearing it out of the printer as soon as it was done, Bulma began reading it and soon frowned. Then she looked at Raditz and told him seriously, "Don't transform for a few days, it will complicate things more. I'll be back in a bit." After telling Raditz what not to do, Bulma quickly went out. She needed to be fast. She did not want to lose her husband, not when she just found out she was about to be a mom. Blub. Bubbles erupted from Raditz's mouth as he murmured an okay. He then quietly closed his eyes and went to sleep. He could sense Pai Pai just outside the room, but Bulma seems to have stopped her from coming in. Raditz assumed it was to give him time to rest. "I'll be off too, King." Giving a salute, Nappa turned away and went out with a resolute face. Kakarot, Vegeta and Gohan were still not here. Currently he was the only capable Saiyan besides his king. The prince and princess were too young to fight properly, at least not against anything he himself would have trouble against. So he needed to be in top shape, especially now that his king was in a bad condition. Step. As soon as Nappa stepped out of the room, Pai Pai swam up to him. "How's he? How's Raditz?" "Oh." Both Pai Pai and Jin asked Nappa, one with irritation and panic and one was simply copying her mother, including the frown. Nappa let a small smile appear on his face. The little one was surely cute. "Queen, the king is resting. Queen Bulma is trying to find a cure right now. She hopes he'll make a full recovery soon." Looking down for a second, Pai Pai remained silent, then raised her head with an emotionless face. "Don't sugarcoat it, Nappa. Tell me clearly, is Raditz going to make it?" Closing his eyes, Nappa slowly gave a defeated sigh. "Maybe not, Queen. The chances look slim unless Queen Bulma does something soon." Nodding her head without another ounce of emotion on her face, Pai Pai left quietly. Even Jin stopped babbling because she sensed the atmosphere around her mother had changed. Nappa watched her go and then clenched his teeth. Bang! Hitting the wall in anger, Nappa scowled. "Damn it, we just got rid of Frieza and now this. King, please, you have to survive." Leaving the lab, Nappa walked towards the gravity chamber. All he could do now was get stronger to protect his king and his legacy. Chapter 80. Mutant Saiyan. When Raditz woke up, it was the next day. Instead of his usual alarm, he was awakened from his slumber because of a sharp pain in his chest, which subsided as quickly as it came due to the painkillers pumped into his healing fluid. Sigh. "It's affecting me even now. I shouldn't feel anything from the painkillers yet, it hurts." Which meant whatever was causing his condition had worsened considerably. This was bad news. Raditz wasn't sure how long he could hold on. For all he knew, he would drop dead the next second, but still, he wasn't completely without hope. Future Goku might not have gotten the dragon's help due to him being in his home and nobody knowing he would actually die until it was too late. But Raditz was Bulma's husband. They always had the Dragon Balls in their room and he knew Bulma was summoning the dragon right now. Sure, dragon can't revive people dying of natural causes and maybe it might even have some restriction on curing diseases that he didn't know of, but the dragon could still tell them a cure, can't he? And that was exactly what Bulma was trying to do right now. If the dragon can't heal Raditz, she would ask for a cure that can. It has started, thought Raditz as he felt the dragon's key signature appear. Although he was looking forward to a cure, he still wasn't completely sure what was wrong with him. He had some doubts about his situation right now. Currently he was leaning towards Goku's heart disease catching him first, but somehow that didn't feel right to him. He felt as if his condition was different, as if he was becoming stronger? Not ki-wise, no, his ki reserves were in fact dwindling as his life force declined, but his body itself was becoming tougher, denser. He didn't know what was happening to him, if this was just his Saiyan biology attempting to fight the heart disease using Zenkais or something. But Raditz was certain of one thing, something was very wrong with his situation. His gut told him his condition was different from Goku's, who was still training in Yidrit right now. As Raditz floated in his healing tank and waited for the dragon's wish, Bulma, Nappa, and Pai Pai stood before the dragon. "State your wish, but there can be only one." A booming voice rang throughout the Capsule Corporation. Shenron was summoned and he was ready to grant a wish. Bulma didn't wait too long for her wish. She had already articulated what she wanted before summoning Shenron. "Shenron, can you cure Raditz?" Eternal Dragon's eyes narrowed after hearing the wish and after 3 seconds he spoke. Sorry, I cannot fulfill that wish. Before Bulma and the rest questioned him on why, Shenron gave the reason himself. There is nothing wrong with the man named Raditz, he is not sick. Nappa looked angrily at the eternal dragon and barked. What nonsense. Pai Pai also clenched her fist in frustration and turned towards Bulma. She figured they will think of something together. But curiously Bulma was frowning and thinking instead of looking lost. She knows something. Concluded Pai Pai. She knew Bulma well enough to recognize this behavior. Bulma herself ignored the eyes of Pai Pai and Nappa. She was thinking that the test results indeed made sense if Raditz wasn't sick. Hey Shenron, can you tell me what's wrong with him? The eternal dragon paused for a second and asked. Is that your wish? Clicking her tongue, Bulma looked upset. She figured she could trick the Dragon Balls into giving the information for free and then ask for a cure. But now that didn't look possible, so before she made a decision she needed a confirmation. He is not going to die midway, is he? Shenron growled in a throaty voice and lowered his head. No, he will recover on his own. After 1 week on 3:52 am his body will fully complete its changes. Nodding her head as if she knew what Shenron was talking about, Bulma confirmed her wish. Alright Shenron, then tell me what's wrong with Raditz. No wait, just give me a report on the matter, it'll be easier to tally later on. Shenron's eyes started glowing red as soon as the wish was confirmed. Bulma's reports shot out of her hands and flew to the air. Flip, flip, flip. Pages began flipping and words were printed on the pages magically, and after a few short seconds Shenron was done. Your wish has been fulfilled, farewell. Whoom. The Dragon Balls shone and rushed towards the sky, then quickly scattered across the entire world the next second, taking the weather phenomenon with it. Thup. The magically printed notes landed before Bulma on the grassy ground. She picked up the report and started reading it. Pai Pai and Nappa looked at each other and then at Bulma. Although she was concentrating on the report, Pai Pai also wanted to know. Out with it then? What is it? Asked Pai Pai with her hands folded. This was something she picked up from Raditz along the way. Looking up from the document, Bulma gave an apologetic look. Sorry, I was confirming something. Raditz isn't sick, the dragon is right. Nappa looked confused at his queen's words. But the king, he is in pain. Bulma looked down at the reports and took out a pen, then opened it with her teeth and marked a line on the report. It's because his body is changing. Without looking up from her papers she asked Nappa. Did his pain start when he tried to transform into a great ape? Remembering that day a week ago, Nappa looked confused for a while then patted his bald head. Yeah, I remember now, the king wanted to transform but his chest started hurting so he stopped. When a Sun went great ape, the first thing that happened was their heart starts beating powerfully. It's a constant powerful heartbeat which then fills the Sun's body with enough energy to trigger their transformation. That was about how far Raditz went before collapsing. Could something be wrong with the king's heart then? Shaking her head at Nappa's words, Bulma looked serious and explained. No, nothing's wrong, it's just that Raditz trained on the way back from Namek. He almost pushed himself the limit back then. He is about as strong as he possibly could be in base as you guys call it, although you lot can still become stronger using transformations. The last part Bulma murmured with a low voice. Bulma didn't know right now, but through pure science she had reached a conclusion that Goku took years to reach. Goku, even after the entirety of Z, was incapable of beating Namek Arc Frieza in his base, according to Beerus, that is, unless God Ki is gained or a carry is used, the Sun's base limit resides there. Nappa and Pai Pai listened while Bulma continued with her explanations after dumbing it down considerably. Listen, if Raditz transformed into a Super Sun like Gohan it wouldn't be a problem, but now that he has reached a limit in base yet he attempted to go Zero, a problem has emerged. You see, Oizuru is also your base form, it is not an energy amplifier like Super Saiyan is, that's your real body becoming bigger and stronger. Bulma told Nappa while pointing towards his tail. Nappa asked in a confused voice. Then what's the problem? The king has broken the limit of his base, he is now stronger. Twitching her lips, Bulma shook her head at the dumb martial arts meatheads. It's not that simple, he has reached a mitochondrial limit? A genetic limit, that is a normal Sun's proper limit? You don't get past that by training normally. You would have to change the nature of the energy itself or compress it along the way, but that's besides the point. Shaking her head again, Bulma folded the sheet up, then began walking towards Raditz's room. Because Raditz has pushed the limits of his base without changing the energy density itself, the body's Zenkai property has started reacting. He's, for the lack of a better term, evolving. His body is pushing itself past a normal Sun. He is mutating right now. Nappa and Pai Pai followed along with a confused expression, but Bulma didn't elaborate further. She'll explain everything when Raditz recovers and she gets to do some more tests. Working on Dr. Gero's android gave her a lot of experience regarding energy and ki. This was now helping her understand what was happening to Raditz. If nothing else, after his body finishes adjusting itself he will be in a different class compared to normal Suns, a true monster of his species.